Stranded in the middle of nowhere, a man in a suit wondered how he would get by. If you left Earth for another world. Big plans formed when he met a girl who looked like she belonged in an RPG. Back in reality, he believed his heart and body were failing because all he did was work. He couldn't save anything and had no idea why he was still alive. Waiting for the train, he thought about this. Lately, he hadn't watched much animal content, even though the parallel universe trend was still popular. If he went to a parallel universe, he might become an adventurer or a hero. He couldn't do it, even though he no longer wanted to keep working and would rather have some fun and a bit of luck. Suddenly, he woke up, still at the train station. I realized the last train was already leaving. Luckily, the doors were still open. When he got on, he thought he had almost missed it. It was being greeted by a girl he did not know. It's a little Suki that meeting him was a pleasure. The boy asked who she was, and she said she was a goddess. With a smile, she told him that from that moment on he would live in a parallel universe. Exhausted, he soon asked whether this was a prank or something, but the girl told him to wait, and summer. After explaining, she said that unfortunately the boy had died and would now be sent to another world to begin a second life. She had come to give him something essential for surviving here, a skill he already possessed. The boy was still trying to process whether he had really died. The girl continued, saying he needed to choose which skill to take because it would help him, and while he decided he still had to accept that he was dead and really going to the parallel universe he had thought didn't exist. Being able to pick any skill didn't help, because a power from some disgusting insect would be useless, so focusing on combat skills looked better even though he wasn't really that kind of person. Wanting a more fun life, he chose his card and handed it to the girl. She soon. He was warned that there were far more useful alternatives than that, but he had already decided. Then there was nothing left to discuss. She warned him she would send him to the first city and told him to be careful. On arrival, a terrifying creature that looked like a giant sentry greeted him. Noticing it, he ran as fast as he could. This was clearly not a city, and he cried out to the goddess who had spoken to him minutes before, if this was. In his new life, he was in trouble. Then someone told the boy to duck. While battling to rescue him from that terrible monster, the little swordsman was glad he had arrived in time to help the boy. People wondered who that cocky guy was. Anyway, he decided to thank him for his help, but the hero only cared about keeping the protagonists. He seemed safe and introduced himself as Hayato, calling our boy a wanderer, which caught his attention. He said he had been reincarnated in that world. A girl interrupted the conversation and asked Hayato who the stranger was. He soon introduced himself as Itsuki, and a group of girls stared at his sudden arrival while he stood amazed at the harem before him. They surrounded Hayato for a minute before properly greeting the protagonist. He found himself wondering how many things he could do with those girls. He could hardly wait to lie down, enjoy his harem, and be fed. Instead, inside a cart, he heard the girls tell him they were already close to the city. Hayato felt a pang of nostalgia when he saw a wanderer in the parallel universe. One of the girls asked if the Japan he mentioned had once been his home. Shifting the subject slightly, the hero asked whether meeting the goddess had given him a unique skill, then confirmed it, saying she would be surprised by what he'd. Then he appealed to their friendship. He received a coin in his hands, which made the people there uncomfortable. For our boy it was exciting, because once a day he would get a fixed amount of money based on his level and not have to work. With only one coin, the skill was hardly ideal, but Hayato still asked what he would do next. The protagonist had no answer because his skills were only allowance, alchemy, and agriculture. It was safer to avoid disgusting things and magical creatures, so Hayato suggested that he start. If he didn't like combat, he could still train in alchemy. The city was already close. Our boy is ready to look over his day. This felt like destiny. He really had arrived in a parallel universe. For now, he should focus on finding a guild. Walking, he couldn't help noticing the attractive women nearby. He was ready to use every skill he had learned to build a life surrounded by women like that, but he was in no rush. His priority was living a more relaxed, laid-back life. Then his real life, after that, he would have anew. He decided to stop at a skewer's bar first to grab a bite. For now, he should look at the map Hayata had given him. The map pointed to the Alchemy Guild, and he couldn't stop wondering what he'd find there. Someone pulled him from behind, leaving the boy confused about the situation. She looked like a little girl, but said nothing. The young man crouched down to find out what was wrong and whether she was lost, and when her stomach growled, he offered her a skewer and asked if she was hungry. Then he noticed a metal collar on the little girl. was wearing. It was not long before a young man. An old man appeared and scolded the protagonist for feeding someone else's slave without permission. But the girl looked too young to be a slave. Yasis, a mustached slave trader, introduced himself and suggested the protagonist might want to buy her, but Suki wasn't into that. The world felt absurd. He shouted, warning Yasis that a giant caterpillar had arrived. He told the girl to hurry as he said goodbye. At last, he reached the Alchemy Guild, recalling the hero's advice to make a guild card before anything else. He opened the door and was surprised to see the hall empty. He asked for permission to see if he would get a response and heard someone tell him to stop shouting. An elderly woman said she could hear his words clearly and wasn't. Death, she then asked what he was doing there. He found himself in an awkward situation. Itsuki introduced himself, saying Hayato had mentioned the place and that he wanted to register with the guild, and the woman recognized the name and told him not to worry about a letter of introduction. She had even heard of him and of his troubles with the aristocracy when he was a wandering novice. She handed the young man a paper and held his hand as soon as he took it. It caused flames to ignite. Speaking naturally, the woman explained it was his guild card and that he should take care of it. He was celebrating his new life in that fantasy when the woman reminded him to pay the registration fee. He agreed but asked her to teach him something, and she finally introduced herself as Bala Reinwish. Apologizing for his impatience, he again insisted that she teach him a little about alchemy. Bala Reinrich was the only one to say those apologies were not sincere and that she hated meeting people who changed their minds. It felt early, but after looking at his skills, he clearly had a talent for alchemy, so it was time to see what he could do. After separating some materials, she asked him to try making a basic potion himself. He'd already started grinding herbs when the woman reminded him she'd asked him to start with the basics, even though he didn't see why that was necessary given his skills. Bella Reinrich explained he could use magic to make the potion, but it would be poor quality and might fail. The more knowledge he had, the better the result. It could also affect the chance of success when using the skill. She handed a small bottle to the young man. He started explaining that the basics of alchemy were disassembly, synthesis, and deconstruction. If he didn't understand these concepts, he couldn't do anything. There was no need to worry about remembering everything because his body would take care of it. Deconstruction was the most basic, so the young man would start there, and Bella Reinrich had a mountain of ores for him to deconstruct. They spent much of the time experimenting, and the woman, the human, was committed to teaching the young man as well as possible. Unable to continue, he had no strength left. The woman encouraged him, saying he had made some impressive potions during that time. At that moment, a girl named Rita announced she was returning, and Bella Reinrich asked him to help the young man because he had run out of fuel. At snack time, the queen was shocked by how fast the young man was eating, and Rita handed him a tea that he thanked her for. The woman asks him to wait while she eats a snack, then tells him she sees potential in the boy and asks him to work there. It gives the MC an ugly expression. She ignores it and says she'll lend him a bed so he can sleep for now. She kept the young man's lodging fee and would go to the Adventurers Guild tomorrow to sell the potions he had made and check their quality. Seeing that it was a low-end product of good quality and always in high demand, she asked if the young man needed money. He confirms that. The next day, a man asked for help after being robbed, drawing the attention of bystanders. A crazy guy with a knife told everyone to get out of the way and said he wasn't afraid of them. People called them fools, but the girl nearby was not scared at all. She puts one of her weapons in front of the thief's foot to trip them, making him curse. Refusing to back down, she gets help from a friend who pins the young man and earns the girl's praise. Seeing the young man on the ground, one of them asked whether he had overdone it, but he was still breathing, so that was not the case. The citizens are shocked that two girls did it by themselves, but Aina simply returns the items to the woman, who thanks her for the help. Away from the commotion, the protagonist asks Bella Reinrich what happened. The woman tells him to go to the guild and leave it alone. Arriving at last, he was surprised to be doing business, since he hadn't expected to do that until he reached that world. The boy was already fast asleep, while Bella Reinrich told Hayato the moon looked ugly, which reminded the boy of the night he arrived in that world. Without small talk, she asked what the boy needed. He gives a bag to the woman and says it is for the MC. He offered a little help because he was a nice guy, which surprised the other man. The next day, the protagonist was thrilled to receive a gift that gave him a place to store his potions, and entering the guild, he was eager to start doing business. It wasn't until he looked around that he realized the place felt more like a bar than anything. Two somewhat intimidating men turn to face the protagonist, who tries to remain composed. The place was awful, but he had to focus on not staring at anyone despite the bad vibe. All the other men figured he was from the pharmaceutical guild because of the bag he carried. Then he finally found a clerk with a friendlier. Noticing his face, she asked if he needed anything. Hesitant at first, the boy blurted it out, explaining he had some potions to sell. He wanted to buy as much as possible with what he could get. The men stared at Itsuki, wondering if he had come to sell expensive potions there. The mood couldn't be any worse. He tried to focus on the girl, who said those potions were low quality. Then one of the adventurers arrived, calling for Miss Ferris. He asked if there was a mission that day and if he could. When she got distracted, she deliberately slammed Itsuki's head onto the table. They smashed his potions and left him desperate. Someone called him a fool and said they didn't want him to sell his potions there. He felt lost because he had worked hard to create all that material, and it was the result of his labor. He clearly remembered Bella Rienrich praising some of them. Even while taunting the bald man, he asked what he would do and whether he would cry to his mother or wife. That made the others laugh. The boy grew very angry, and the adventurer stepped forward to challenge him. Ferris, frightened, told them to wait and not fight inside. The bald man had already drawn his sword and was beckoning the other man to fight. The MC didn't know why the bald man had ruined his potions, but he was going to take him down in a fight. Before that could happen, Ine stepped in and asked what they thought they were doing. In the silence, she repeated her question. Strangely, the men there were afraid of the girl, and the protagonist did not understand the situation. Luck arrived with her friend and told the boy to pull his hand back. Only then did the MC realize how much it hurt when his hand hit Aina's weapon. They gave their names and said they were from the right. The red front confused our boy because he had no idea what it meant, even though he had seen the pretty girls the day before. Aina was especially beautiful. The boy resumed the conversation with the bald man, saying he belonged to the Alchemy Guild, not the Pharmaceutical Guild. That leaves him bewildered, and he even challenges the contents of his bag, but the MC shows his guild card to prove it. The bald man is left stunned. Aina steps forward and apologizes, saying it was just a misunderstanding and they never meant to cause trouble for the Alchemy Guild. The boy insists the misunderstanding is nonsense and blames the hero before him for not checking the facts before hitting others, and Sort steps in to ask if that is how he meant to thank his friend for helping, who reprimands. She asks him to let her compensate for the wasted potions on behalf of the guild. Giving a puppy dog look, she insists the boy forgive her. Bella Rienrich suddenly enters, surprising the heroes who all seem to know her well. The woman showed little interest in talking and insisted they had destroyed her product, saying she would not accept just a weak apology. Itsaki, too, was unsure how to react to her being there. Bella Rienrich demands they call the guild master to hear what the others had to say afterwards. The boy apologizes for destroying the potions, but the lady tells him not to blame himself and says the guild's people were at fault. They should be the ones trembling in fear, not the protagonist. It was easier said than done in that situation. Since the responsible party was present, the crown warned the Alchemy Guild would do nothing further. Doing business with them left everyone indignant, the most. The attached man still argues that if it really happened, they'd have to buy the very expensive potions from the Pharmaceutical Guild. The bald man was the first to say he should have checked the boy's identity before anything else and apologized. Even Ferris, who had nothing to do with it, apologized. I'll chime in too and do it better. Ella Reinrich snaps awake, saying she ruined her student's work, that he poured his soul into those potions, and asking what he would do about it. Already feeling unwell, the guildmaster listened, as the woman said she had a letter of introduction from Hayato, and was sure everyone knew what that meant. Everyone was shocked because it involved Hayato, the legendary dragon slayer. The protagonist was stunned since he had never imagined Hayato Haimu could be a celebrity in that world, and the guildmaster declared the adventurers responsible would be expelled, and that he would pay 1 million for the potions. Bella Rienrich thought she must have misheard, because the number he gave was so small it could be a mistake. Sorty jumps into the discussion, asking why they must pay such an exorbitant sum, and even Itsuki found it too much. The crown tells the girl to be quiet because the student belonged to her, and Hayato would always be on his side. She was already tired of it all, and the boy tried to scold her, saying the matter was already settled. Everyone wanted her to listen to the student, but she had lost interest. Aina steps into the discussion and asks them to wait, understanding why the fee is so high, which leads the old woman to think the girl will pay, and the girl's friend even argues. Before she can, the redhead says she would become a slave. They earned the money, shocking everyone. One person stands there. Her friend and the adventurers ask what she meant. Even the MC did not understand why that happened. Aina asks her to calm down, while Bella Ryanrich asks about her proposal. Our boy asked what she meant, and the adventurers defended the girl, saying she did not have to carry that burden because it was their fault. When asked if he could do better, the bald man had no reply. One of the hero's remarks was that the guild's reputation would fall if Ine actually became a slave. The girl disagreed, saying people needed them so it would be hard for that to happen. Ferris also tries to convince the girl that it was a terrible idea. For her, everything was wrong and she did not want the other girl to become a slave. Her friend comforts her with a brief kiss and says everything will be fine. Amid the confusion, the MC tells his new master that the whole situation was wrong, and the crown replies that the girl was very naive. Amid the chaos, Luck shouted that she refused to accept it. She drew her best friend's attention, and Nico argued that some potions had been destroyed, but that did not mean her friend had to submit to them. It had already been decided, even though the blonde worried about what would happen to her adventure. Aina says she's a warrior, and warriors can take care of themselves, but she wondered who would care for the people if the adventurers were gone. That's why she asked for the key's forgiveness. Bella Ryanrich insisted it was a bad idea, but the woman had already decided not to help, and the redhead was almost crying as she pleaded. The boy couldn't understand why it was so hard. He came there seeking an easy, fun life, but it did not turn out that way. Since arriving, he'd only had confusion to sort out. He didn't know how to handle the woman in front of him. He decided to say no. This left her confused and became a real headache for the protagonist. He explains he didn't think enslaving someone would help him in that situation. The redhead had saved him, so he was fine and could not make his savior a slave. Bella Ryanrich watches the conversation closely. The boy keeps talking, saying that even though Hayato took him to the Alchemy Guild, nothing changed. He promised to keep making his potions and said everything was fine, but the girl still looked worried after all that talk. When she tries to give up, the boy keeps saying that everything was fine. The redhead insists she is confident in her strength as a warrior and would be useful to him, but the boy says he didn't want someone as beautiful as her to become a slave. The compliment surprised her and left Luck burning with anger. However, Bella Ryanrich liked the idea of a red-haired girl as a slave despite the apprentice reprimanding her, and she still suggested using the girl for their work. To settle and grow there, he would need extra hands. He tries to argue against it, but the crown found him very kind. Taking the lead, she says she will wait for the redhead the next day to see what she can do. Then he tells them to go, leaving the adventurers behind. By bedtime, the boy felt exhausted. The day had been extremely hard, and he wasn't sure he could live there. Either way, it was time to sleep. Waking up, he smelled something delicious in his bed and felt his arm was numb. Then he noticed the dog. The voice came from someone who definitely wasn't there when he went to sleep. It was Aina. She's in a deep sleep. The boy jumps up, startled, and asks what she was doing. In reply, she says that Bala Reneric had explained that this was what slaves did. That made our boy resentful of the crown. In any case, he politely asked her to change. He promised not to look, because it might get him into a lot of trouble. His request made the redhead wonder if something was wrong with her. It wasn't. It wasn't quite that. Still, the girl insists, apologizing that she wasn't good enough for him. That's when Luck entered the room and called the girl, which made the key even more surprising. At the door, she stands dazed for a few minutes, just seconds before kicking the protagonist in the face as punishment. Throwing him back onto the bed, he wonders why the cat did that. She scolds him and says she will save her friend from him, even though it is a misunderstanding. Aina stepped in to calm them, but they were already in a heated argument. Meanwhile, Rita and Bella Ryanrich sipped tea, thinking how nice it was to be young as they listened to the noises from above. After the confusion, the boy took the two to eat and said they would meet a slave trader afterward. Aino explains this was necessary because she needed to find out how much she was worth as merchandise and asks her master to take care of her. As soon as she finishes her sentence, he says it sounded very bad. She offers other options to replace master, like love, dear, or sovereign. It might be. It's a bit early, but she could call him my precious and make him nervous, and Aino explains that her race had a rule to call their husband my precious after the first night. Luck is first to object, saying it is not necessary. She would soon buy back her freedom. That was surprising, but the blonde was quite possessive. Aina says she couldn't do it because it wouldn't convey her forgiveness. It wasn't a real problem, since the Alchemy Guild needed the money. The redhead accepted that view, but refused to change her mind. The MC couldn't understand why the warrior was so stubborn. Luck finally gave in and said he would go with her in that case. That way the monster wouldn't get its filthy paws on his friend. The MC stops to check that Anna still wants to go to the merchant, and she confirms. Hearing someone call him my lord felt very strange. He felt a little sorry for the girl who wasn't bad. He still didn't understand what she wanted by doing that. After that, the group met at the Adventurers Guild. Ferris calls to get their attention and find out what they had been doing, because they had been gloomy all morning. All the guys start talking about Aina, with faces like dogs wanting a chain. The girl says sulking all day won't help because Aina gave them that place, so now they have to find a way to do something for her. She was right, and from then on they had to work hard to honor their partners. Partner outside, a little boy calls Bella Rienrich. Asked how business was, he replied it was going quite well. Curious about the crown's new apprentice, he wanted to know if the apprentice was skilled and thought it was cool to have someone new. By then, the boy had finally reached the merchant's house. Actually, it was a mansion. When he first saw it, he assumed it belonged to a noble, but instead he found a slave trader. Opening the door, he asked for permission. A beautiful girl welcomed him and invited him inside. I apologize for the delay. Assuming Bala Reinrich sent the group there, she asked him to come with them. Seated in the hall, Itsuki couldn't help but notice how luxurious the place was. The merchant arrived at last. Having heard about the boy from his mistress, he told them they were welcome at the company. He still remembered the features and remarks from the other day, but now it was Yasis's turn to introduce herself formally. The servant brings them tea, and the boy thanks her, unable to take his eyes off the girl's features. Aina was even pretty, and that made it torture. Yasis then gets the customer's attention. Asks if he liked the girl serving him, leaving him embarrassed and telling him not to worry because he was not there for that. Still, the man insists the servant's name was Wendy, a new product from his company. It seemed strange to see such a beautiful woman treated like a slave. Luck noticed how the boy looked at the girl, "I'll be back then," making a list and asking them to hurry. That brings Yasis back to her senses and lets her focus on the main topic. She needed to assess how the two would act as Farah's slaves. Two red-fronted people were in good health, and Luck felt uncomfortable hearing such things about herself. The merchant adds that Bala Reneric already gave the details, and the sum was too large for a single slave. In fact, if you serving alone would be very hard, and the blonde could ease the burden by becoming a slave too, which she would. She understood and assured her friend it was fine because they'd always been together. So she offers to become a slave too. Wendy asks the two to follow her. Yasis decides to tell our boys a little more about male slaves, who listened closely despite having little choice. First of all, some were debt slaves bought and sold for economic reasons, and others were criminals forced into it. Some people were made special slaves for royal reasons or other causes. In another room, Wendy begins the assessment, confirms the two adventurers are good in combat, and asks if they know anything about domestic service, which both deny. Now it was time to assess other matters. More should have been shown about how they played without armor. Despite feeling embarrassed, both comply with the evaluator's request and ask if that was acceptable, and there was enough, thankfully, and now it was time to check the measurements. She pulls one of the girls, tells her to turn around, and asks, as permission to check whether her buttons were working properly. The girl is visibly embarrassed, while Wendy. She explains there were many kinds of slaves, but if her master ordered it, she had to comply, and being able to satisfy him made the girl more valuable. She still had little experience with games, and Aina confirmed it. Fortune nudges both of them, urging them to stop soon. Trembling with hatred, she heard Wendy say the two probably weren't worth a dime at this stage. Back in the living room, Yasis said this was for slave contracts. The girl then returned and apologized for the delay, and it. She explained she had completed the evaluation and thanked them for the patience. The key person wanted to know why the two had such serious faces, but Ine asked to leave it. It goes, Luck was more aggressive, giving the boy a few pats on the back to make him stop and die. Aina analyzed all the market results carefully. Anna could be used in combat and as a playable companion to the protagonist, while her friend could only be used for combat. All of them were last in that, and nothing else. Apart from that, Aina's stats were normal, but the merchant asked why she couldn't play with the master, and Wendy offered to explain. The woman said the girl was semi-human, still underage and needing to grow, so she couldn't play certain games, which made the little one more stressed, and she said it was none of their business. Wendy continued, confirming she had inspected some of her hidden buttons. The blonde had terrible flashbacks, and because the other slave had no tact while explaining, Itsuki was surprised to learn the girl was part dog, not part wolf. The final evaluation showed that Aina was worth 600,000, while Luck was worth. It was worth 400. Now it was time to finalize the contract. Everyone had to step into the circle and hold hands. Like they were doing a team handshake. Yasis would begin with the official protocols, swiftly sealing the agreement among the three. The protagonist felt his hand burning and a small emblem of people. He asked if everything was all right with the mark on his hand now. The Yasis said the marking was powerful because she made it with one of her abilities. Also, the contract she wrote forbade the slaves from harming their master to ensure safety. He called Luck next, who was. She is already ready to test this with the torch she has. A terrible headache stopped her before she could hit him. This happened every time she tried to harm her master, and that same day she could do nothing, so Suki already regretted it. He still made sure the girl was okay and was just joking. She warned her that if she resorted to violence, she would always be disciplined. Even Aina laughed at the conversation. Make a comment to draw the attention of both. They quickly explained that others could ignore her, although it looked like the two were enjoying themselves, which they denied, saying it was not a fun situation. At all, with everything settled, they could finally leave that mansion, and the girls asked what they should do. Who apologized to the Lord first, because they had to go to the guild before anything else to file a report. That's it. That night in the city's suburbs, a girl said Hayato still hadn't returned. Her friend complained that his delay meant she couldn't eat meat because he had to be in the master's presence for it. The girl quickly cut her off, saying she wouldn't eat meat until they reached the next city. She rummaged through a nearby chest, sure there was dried meat to add to the soup, but it held only emergency rations. Someone else asked what was wrong and told her not to put meat in the soup because she wanted some too. Her colleague asked what she was doing in those clothes. The elf explained she had been bathing back there and was scolded by the girl who said Hayato could catch her in the sweat. The little one thought that was an exaggeration and did not understand why her people were so concerned with those things. Since you're here, please subscribe to our channel. She didn't realize the boy still hadn't come back. The first girl decided to call Craig. Before Chris left, her friend warned her to take a bath too because she smelled bad. Chris was focused only on the meat she wanted to eat. Inside the forest, Hayato paused to think. Another girl draped a cloak over him, saying he might catch a cold. Chris cared for her master as casually as fastening a belt, and he thanked her. To her, it was nothing special. Watching the sky, he wondered how the protagonist was faring during his stay in that new world. By all appearances, he was doing very well, having a final drink at the Guild of All Adventures. Now the heroes were much friendlier toward him, telling him to enjoy himself even though it was time to leave. Taking the opportunity, they apologized for past mistakes since Aina made it possible for them to be there now, and it was the least they could do for the time being. The bald man stepped forward and said he'd feel a little embarrassed if the boy couldn't forgive them. Itsuki was already used to situations like that. It reminded the men that he was only a wanderer, yet they still wished him a prosperous future. Fortunately, we couldn't, after all. They were in that state because of them, so it was better to say something. His argument left them without protection. After just improving his relationship with the bald man, the antagonist felt uneasy. His friend also said she was drunk and needed to stop talking. While they were talking, the girl couldn't resist teasing that they would now be that coward's playthings and be forced to do things she would never want. He took the opportunity to say he didn't even like small buttons like hers, and she was offended. She didn't care about his opinion, they were her slaves now. Tired of that kind of relationship, she chose to remain silent from then on. Again, the heroes called him and joined the men, leaving the girls alone at the counter. That was her, Sort warned her friend not to be fooled by it. Her colleague was a boy, and she couldn't understand why things were so simple for him. She watched her new master interact with the bald man. Maybe she truly was. Overwhelmed with joy, the protagonist celebrated how amazing the world was. Then one of the adventurers asked whether he could afford the party, but he did not need to worry because he could summon his allowance. And holding the coin, even if it was only one. Some still believed it was an inquiry. One displayed genuine skill, while other heroes worried whether they had enough money to pay for the whole party. It did the same as nightfall. It took the guys a long time to start falling asleep there. That night he met many people from that world. He was amazed by his second life. A life more peaceful and full of fun than the original. He still couldn't believe he'd really died and ended up in another world. The next day he went to the Adventurers Guild, announced he was part of the Alchemy Guild, and was surprised to find the men drinking and swapping advice. The bald man said they were actually waiting for a good mission because the girls from the Red Front had already taken the best ones. Sorta were the group's best warriors, and as slaves they helped our boy gather alchemy ingredients. Meanwhile, Itsuki was learning to make potions and accessories intended for him. At a medium level, his performance improved noticeably and his work progressed smoothly. Not having to hurry in that world, he could work more calmly. The next morning, he was waking up. This key is designed to summon friendship right away. He walked away with a coin, but this time the reward was different. This time it was a gold coin, not the silver one from before, and he could use the money to have fun. When he arrived, he expected to live in peace, but instead faced many problems and a lot of work, and spent much of his time alone with Bala Raineric in the alchemy room. Still unfamiliar with the city and what it offered, he was eager to find ways to enjoy time with the girl. He had to stop for a snack first. He realized then that the only places he knew were the inn and the Adventurers Guild. Living without a map was inconvenient because he would miss out on great places to explore. While thinking aloud, a familiar presence surprised him. The slave trader he'd met the day before was there. Wendy, who was with him, introduced herself again and smiled at the boy with her beautiful face. Seeing Itsaki alone, Yasus invited him to walk and chat. Upon hearing that someone was wandering the city trying to find fun, the guy offered his slave as a guide. That leaves our boy a little lost. Yasus pointed out that the newcomer didn't know the local customs of his new home well and might face difficulties because of that, so I'm sorry. But it would be good for Wendy to help him take his mind off things a little. Noticing the boy still hesitated, the slave wondered whether he was unhappy with. It wasn't just her presence, she denied it and hurried to join the boy, for now. He wanted to buy new clothes, and the girl could be a big help because she knew the local customs. Still, she went along with most of the boy's suggestions, even when an outfit felt too formulaic. While still in the store, the girl offered to look at other items, but the attendant caught her attention. On reflection, it was the first time Itsuki had gone shopping with a girl. Wendy called him again soon. She wanted him to look at the outfit she had tried on. Her insistence on coming made her look very beautiful and left him speechless. Wendy had to call his name again because he was so speechless, and it wasn't hard to choose that outfit for his new companion, who hesitated because they had come to the store to find clothes for the protagonist. He didn't mind, especially since he had bought the items at a big discount. The girl, embarrassed, thanked him and promised to take good care of the gifts. It was starting to become very attached to that girl, which perhaps wasn't such a good thing. But she distracted him by saying it was her turn to reward him, and that she would ease his fatigue, just as Yasus had promised. She took the boy's hand and led him. He went to a sort of restaurant first, which left him quite satisfied, to say the. They also stopped to enjoy a banjo performance in the city center. Those alternate worlds felt truly incredible to him. Their fun was cut short when a stranger interrupted, clearly disappointed to see the girl with someone else. Suki asked if the two had any relationship, while the man shouted asking about it. Suk's identity. He quickly explained that the girl was anxious toward him, but the loudmouth was not satisfied and demanded he return his slave since he had her in his possession. On hearing that, Wendy clung even tighter to the protagonist, and Itsuki scolded him for scaring his companion. Still, the fool kept shouting that Wendy shouldn't be seen with that kind of man and told him to let go. The protagonist ignored the remarks and asked his companion who the man was, and the companion said he was the son of a powerful city figure. In the city, the brat kept throwing a tantrum, saying he was saving up 120 million to buy the girl. The price was far higher than Itsuki could imagine a slave being worth, and the spoiled brat insisted they call Yasus and end that nonsense. Our boy didn't care and would protect the girl at all costs, making the wretched kid even angrier. In the woods, Owner and Sort were talking about how the day's hunt had been mediocre. Sort didn't care. After all, everything they managed to get would go to their new master. Only her friend reminded her that this was part of the contract. It seemed absurd to her that without collecting materials, the new lord couldn't work, and she refused to be his slave. Forever, in the center of the city, the boy boasted he was Wengia's new owner, though that wasn't true. She trembled from the sudden confrontation and nearly cried. It left Itsuki worried he might have hurt her by accident while holding her. Despite everything, the loudmouth kept telling the other to let go of his whinge. Even if he said he was very important there, it made no difference to the protagonist. His challenge surprised the boy. It was point. I wouldn't try that kind of thing with him, since he was already used to dealing with idiotic people at his previous job. Tension hung between them, and the rich kid kept saying he would never forgive him for that insolence. He refused to hand Indy over on a silver platter to anyone, and Itsuki wasn't going to leave his friend in that man's house. Then the girl finally spoke up and asked whether our boy was really thinking about. Meeting her made the protagonist apprehensive, and her expression deepened that unease. Yasis interrupted the silly argument between the two guys, already convinced the confusion was Dadarol's fault. He hadn't expected to get into trouble with his dear client, as soon as he saw. The mustached Dadarol said he arrived at the right time. He asked what was going on, since he had already said he intended to buy Indy. His words only made Yas wonder whether he had managed to get all the money. That certainly wasn't what was happening. The same was true for Itsuki. Did Errol ask why Indy was with him and whether he had been sold? The seller says it was only a guide he sent, even if that's the case. That was it. Morisinho is indignant. He knew who his father was and the consequences of opposing him. Yasis was unafraid and challenged him by asking what would happen in that case. This caught the playboy off guard and he stammered, not sure what to say. It's okay. He froze in shock because the merchant looked exactly like his and behaved just as coldly. Darrell refused to lose, so he insisted he would get the money and would not let Itsuki come anywhere near his chosen slave. The stashed man shrugs and suggests the two compete for the group. A girl surprises the protagonist. That clearly upset the girl who was caught between the two. Aina and Sorta of the Alchemy Guild were returning home. They halt the hunt and ask what is needed. Aina apologizes first for the inconvenience. She needed to know if the Lord was nearby, and the woman said he was, pointing to the room where he might be. Sort announces the pair's entrance into the room with all the usual delicacy and a solid kick to the door. Spotting the man mixing his potions as they hand over the materials, he praises them for their good work, but something catches the little one's attention. She asks what the pretty things on the table were. She can't resist touching the accessories while Aina questions why there were so many there. The boy feels. It feels awkward to explain what actually happened. Sort calls him an idiot in a shout heard across the city. Arriving in the city, he almost defends the two friends, and Sort tries to reprimand him for making that foolish challenge too. Nobles were terrified at the sound of his name and his father's, but Itsuki had no idea he was that dangerous. He needed help now, and the blonde thought him even more of a coward after he was reprimanded for cursing at her master. Quickly she adds that she won't stop because he was an idiot capable of doing very stupid things. Aina jumps into the conversation, asking her to stop because the master only did that to save a damsel, even though the blonde thought he just wanted another girl with good gaming skills to have. Once more, the redhead apologized for her friend's behavior. She had even told her she wanted to show the city to Itsuki soon, but that would no longer be necessary. The little one cut in, saying that wasn't quite what was going to happen. Aki even tries to move closer and teases Sort to make her uncomfortable. Ine brings the subject back to the duel to find out what kind of competition it is. Basically, it is about gathering money. Yui said he had received a discount and needed $80 million to wrap things up, while Riken had to find a way to get $120. That was all. Also, he made those accessories because he needed $70 million. Realizing what she had said, Sort asked if it was. That was the same $120 million the slave was worth, since her estimated cost was $4. Dollars convinced she only cost more because her buttons were larger, and then she jumped on the master to reprimand him. Anyway, the boy said he wanted them to gather more materials. Something his slaves would have to obey, however. Aina said she would escort the Lord in her free time because strange rumors were circulating about him. Suki says he will stay selling potions at the guild for now, and the girl apologizes for thinking it was not a good time for them. Everything turned out well for the protagonist, suggesting he was very kind. Man, when it was time to leave, Sort could not have been more excited to be. Eat something over at the distant slave sale. While he was thinking in her room, she remembered scolding Itsuki for thinking he had to enter a competition, especially with a guy this anxious. The boy said he would do anything to win. Yasis went into her room to check that everything was okay and to see how she felt that day. The girl honestly says she had no reason to make a deal like that. Yasis responds with an apology for his boldness, and that apology could now bring great fortunes to both sides. This time Yasis was sure everything would be fine, so he asks Wendy to trust him. Still, it looked like he was trying to sell Paradox at an exorbitant price. Being a special slave, he could at least choose a lord. However, the person selling her treated her like a prize in that game without her consent. They stood face to face, and the girl grew more anxious. He asked whether she had enjoyed herself that day. Wendy admits she did quite a lot. It was a very satisfying day, and her current master says she could seek that fun again. It stresses her out because if that's true, she can't understand why she had to join that stupid game that required raising a huge sum of money in just 1 week. Yasis remains calm, wondering if the protagonist really could not do it. He believed the client would not abandon the slave. He was right, the situation would benefit them both. The cost was that Itsaki was already tired at his desk from making so many accessories. Bella Rienrich goes into his room to check if he is okay and whether he plans to open a shop. She insists he take a break while sitting at the table because working too much would only complicate things. The Crown says the girls summarized the story but wanted to know more. Hearing his side, the girl decides young people only do foolish things. The girl probably wasn't that young, and the woman told him to be quiet because she still saw him as a child. The woman gave more detail and shifted the topic because the protagonist wanted to bring something up. He felt accessories had limited potential and wanted to sell potions without the guild's help for that reason. Intrigued, the young man quickly asks if he couldn't do that, but that was not exactly the case. She asks whether he would like to know what kind of business data. She was in. Our girl asks if it was pig farming, which would fit the chubby guy, but she should not interrupt the older woman speaking. In fact, that human pig was a manager at the pharmaceutical guild, and he made his money selling potions in the blue. In the blink of an eye, our girl has no options. It's fine to look for something beyond selling potions. That was just how she needed to be. It was a smart key, and he had almost forgotten one small detail. He could communicate with Hayato through the. Surprised by the call about the card, he asks what the girl needed and then spots movement behind the hero, checking that everything is okay. Facing a monster that looked like a giant chicken, he says everything was. Great. Itsuki then continues the conversation, asking if he can use all the items from the magic bag he gave him. During the conversation, the fight continued, and the girls with him were doing most of the work. Hayato says he could use whatever he wanted, that creature. It was scary, but it meant nothing to the hero. He pointed out that the protagonist could probably use some things only at certain levels, but the young man had already figured that out, and then Itsuki wishes him good luck. He said he'd bring the ores he managed to get from the dungeon next time. Hayato doesn't respond at all because he is completely focused on. After finishing off that creature, on the other end of the line, his friend seemed eager to get the goodies, which was nothing out of the ordinary for him. The protagonist apologizes again for interrupting the hero's fight, but he said the guild cards were very useful because they let him talk to any registered person, even from far away. When he finally hangs up, it's time to get back to it. At work, he produced his accessories non-stop and only interacted with others when Rita or Bella Rainrish entered. Inside the room, meanwhile, deep in the forest, a monster that looked like a hairy pig runs through the bushes. But luck stopped it, telling it to stay quiet while she was hunting. But Aina soon appears and says they had already given up but had gathered enough material to return, which lights up the blonde's face as she finally releases her stress and is ready to go home. With all they had gathered, their lord could easily make accessories, and the redhead hoped he would make great products. Taking the chance, she cleaned up and said her red front wasn't usually like that, and she didn't like it, so she wanted a loan to buy her freedom, and Aina was the only one who seemed happy. Her comment makes her friend doubt what she said and notice the red hint. She explains she did not think everything was bad and felt her friend was getting too soft, since she did not like that type of thing. She was angry at his habit of barging into other people's lives as if it were perfectly fine. Knowing she didn't hate him, she felt too confused to think about it. She refused to accept him because men who liked big buttons were no use, and now it was time to go back and give that idiot a bit of. Arriving at the guild, they found the boy being held by the women. Explaining that he was tired, she tried to cheer him up, but the potion looked too dangerous and he refused to drink it. Ine and Sorda stepped in, insisting it was for his own good and catching the boy by surprise. Later, they forced the boy to take one of their potions, but it tasted so bad he planned to fake swallowing it and spit it out. But Bella Rienrich made sure to check whether he really did. It was swallowed, so we had no choice. He finally woke and heard a sweet voice. His head lay on something soft, and he thought it was a. He lay on a pillow while one of the girls gave him a little water. Soon Aina asked whether he could get up, but he asked to stay a little longer. Sort cut him off, told him to hurry, and when the protagonist realized who it was, he stood up at once. He asked why she had to take care of him, and the girl said she had no choice. When Itsuki tried to argue, the girl called him an idiot. Soon Aina arrived, apologizing for what had happened earlier, while the master grumbled that he was sore and hungry. They made sure he was fed. After the meal, he felt much better. After drinking that strange potion, he could make lots of accessories, but he couldn't remember. Bella Reinrich said the accessories were worth 40 million. With 5 days left until the deadline, he still needed 36 million. All his materials were used up, and he had to find a way to get the remaining money because time was running out. The boy paused to think how to fix the situation, then something caught his attention. A specific project for an apprentice alchemist. One day the mother held some leftover ore, and when she saw it vibrate, she had a sudden revelation. Itsuki, an ordinary office worker, began his journey in a parallel world. The task was extremely difficult. Relying only on images in his head, he made several items. Some were discarded, and others failed to work as he intended. The protagonist stayed determined, using the wisdom of humanity to create a. The tool helped the girls play better on their own, and he finally found out. He finally finished making one of his best controllers. He simply asked what that was. The boy even began explaining. Before realizing he could not explain that to his subordinate, she insisted anyway and asked whether it was a massage tool. After that, she asked Ine if she wanted to use it, since Ine had mentioned having a lot of shoulder pain. The girl said that if it wasn't a bother, she wanted one, so he stood behind her and gave her a shoulder massage. He was using his main device and controlling everything from it with a button. Opening the license stone, he placed it on the girl's tensed muscle. She soon lit up with that infectious sense of humor. She found the vibration very pleasant. She could barely contain herself. Her body went completely numb from so much relaxation. A quick win was possible, so she tried to concentrate. She told herself it was just a massage, even though it felt really good. She asked whether Sort wanted to try, and the girl wondered whether she could actually use it that way. She was clever by Itsuki's standards. He just decided to come clean with her and whispered into her ear, close to her shoulder, what that idea was for. That made the girl even more flushed, revealing her curiosity. But he soon grabbed her. Lifting her weapon, she asked her friend if she could kill that idiot, which made Anna question what the master had said. If the tool was faulty, only the girl was too nervous to say so and asked the protagonist to explain, but he said he needed to go outside for some fresh air first. It left them completely embarrassed. Standing outside at the boy's side, relieved. Although he thinks he acted hastily, that was wrong. Selling it at a nearby store would earn him a good profit. Walking, he couldn't stop thinking about Wendy and hoped she wouldn't forget him. After selling that item, he might be able to get the money. He came upon 3 men in the middle of the pass. Those people didn't seem good at all, and one of them stuck out his foot to trip our girl. She fell to the ground. The one who's been here is the one who's been here. The one responsible for the fall pretended to be in pain and said he would make him pay for his medicine. Forgiving him would cost 2 million, but Itsuki only offers a healing potion, which annoys the idiot. It doesn't take long to see they were likely hired by thugs, since there was no reason for this random pursuit. They act like they don't understand, but our girl doesn't back down and only prepares to run away. When the guys started following her, she came up with a great idea. A gold coin fell from the sky and drew them in, but they did not believe it at first. Seeing the shiny object, they stopped at once. Fortunately, she hadn't used her measuring skill that day, but the bullies still wouldn't let him escape. They tried to hit him from behind with ease. Stopped by a girl who blocks the sword aimed at her. Master, he is very surprised by that. The girl turns and says she's. After succeeding, he is surprised to find Shiro there. She was the girl he met on the street, the day he arrived in that parallel world. They were eating. She had introduced herself to him earlier. A while ago, glad to be eating in general. Back to this. At the scene, the idiots were telling the girl to move aside and asking who she was. She replies that she was her master's shield. If anyone tried to hurt him, she would make them pay, but no one took her seriously and they called her a cursed brother. Brad, including the person who caused Itsuki to trip, and told her not to cry to mommy after the beating they got there. He was too slow, so the girl dodged quickly. He was getting ready to attend when his master ordered him not to kill the man standing before him. By then, it was already too late. The sword was already stuck in the bullies' chests. Everyone present was surprised. Valued for that, the girl deliberately subdues the other idiots to ensure the matter was fully settled. The protagonist thanks her for her help, and she explains that Yasses sent her to protect him. In this case, the key really wants to get to its master's house at that moment. The little one explains her master was the man in front of him and hadn't gone to his house yet, so he clarifies what he meant by Yasses' house, which makes Shiro think he might be willing to buy. The boy is sincere and explains that he can't do that right now, even though it disappoints her. Putting that aside, he asked a favor, saying he wanted to thank her and speak briefly with the child in front of him, and she asked him to follow her. Shiro was very fast, and Itsuki kept tripping over his own feet trying to keep up. He asked to walk hand in hand, and the warrior scolded him, telling him to stop treating her like a child. That wasn't true, he only did it to slow her down. That's why she accepts the proposal. At Yas's house, the seller asked if something had happened because it was very late, but Itsuki was actually there to thank her for protecting Shiro. He can't help noticing how friendly she is with the protagonist, which suggests she really likes him and reminds him that there's something to show. He explained how his new creation worked. Yasus asked what he intended to do with it, and Itsuki said he was planning to sell it but wanted a second opinion. When asked how much it was worth, our boy said about 40 million. For the merchant, the item was worth at most 100,000. He expected that and was ready for a proper sales presentation. He said he wouldn't try to sell the item, which left his friend confused. He says he wanted to sell the rights, meaning he would give the manufacturing rights for that massager to his mustached friend in front of him. Naturally, the proposal was attractive, and Yas's had influence in the. He can enter the market, but he should not be too eager at first. He wanted more details about the contract, so it's key to explain that he would sell the rights for 40 million, handle mass production, leave pricing to Yas's, and receive 50,000 for each piece sold. The proposal looked good for both sides, but the problem: there was no guarantee he would recover the money spent. Yas's could not pay 40 million for something uncertain. It would have potential if there was a lot of demand, but there was no proof the guy could keep producing the product. Cutting him off, the protagonist said he could restock regularly. Even Ine and Sort could get the needed materials. Yasus trusted the two girls to handle that part. While Itsuki was still a stranger, he could leave the city suddenly without any problem. He understood and even agreed with the merchant's view. Trusting a proposal from someone he had just met was impossible. If that were the case, he would offer his own body as collateral and become a slave. Both the merchant and the girl dozing in his lap noticed it. Yasus made sure he was certain about what he said. Finding him fun, he accepted the business proposal. When Itsuki mentioned the slavery contract, the merchant replied that it was fine. He only wanted the rights to the massager, so he would not have to be a slave during the term of the contract. The boy was in good condition. One thing remained. He was a boy and he knew it. We were ready to discuss the money, but the boy had to leave. Before he left, he had a small request. Stepping outside, he found the sky already bright, and he was exhausted after making only 10 massagers. Shiro, who was with him, also looked very sleepy. At last they had arrived at the guild, and he decided to pick her up to let the little one rest, saying he knew she didn't have to keep wearing herself out, but Shiro always promised to protect her master. Later, someone angrily threw a cup on the ground and called the group useless. It was Datero, indignant with the bullies who confronted the protagonist, telling them to go invent something else. His butler interrupted, warning that such sabotage could help their rivals, and that leaving Uribe unhappy would likely cause regret later. Datorol didn't care. He couldn't beat Itsuki without his dirty tricks. Willing to do anything, he sought to gain possession of. Wendy was bathing, getting ready for a new day while thinking of. This was her master. The next day at the Alchemy Guild, Datorol made it a point to speak with me. Meet Yitsuke in person, even though he hadn't arrived by the payment deadline. To ask whether he would still admit defeat. The rich kid thought Itsuki was brave for repeatedly calling him out like that. He suggested acknowledging the power difference between them and conceding defeat. That would happen only in the pig's dreams, and the protagonist said he could keep rolling in the mantle. Angered by the nickname, the chubby boy promised to make Itsuki feel his rage. At that point, Yasus showed up and said he had missed the final deadline. A winner had already been chosen, and nothing would change. showing several bags of cash for The spoiled brat was supposed to be incapable, but Suki didn't even flinch when he said he had done all that and managed to get the 80 million. The win was entirely his. Yas said that was why he had asked to be called there. As you can see, his dear client reached the goal before That ended the game. Despite following the rules, Datarol refused to accept defeat. Someone accused Bella Rienrich of giving all that money to the apprentice, making the lady uncomfortable. He then showed the boy a paper, who was amazed by its content. It was the payment details for all the accessories the boy had sold, and since the guild had bought them for $40 million, there was nothing to discuss. Datarol protested loudly, saying the amount was absurd for jewelry, but the woman scolded him, insisting the estimate was correct and that the boy would not underestimate alchemy. Itsuki grew emotional, as the chubby boy kept saying there were still 40 million missing, and they were pulling a fast one. On him, Yasses then stepped in and called his assistant to explain the account more clearly. At the closing, a subordinate handed a small box to Datero, who was shocked to see the royal symbol on it alongside the new product invented by Itsuki. Still, the rich kid refused to back down, insisting that because the king had approved him as a producer, he could have sold it for a fortune. They still chose to sell the rights to Yasses for only 40 million. Naturally, Itsaki had no idea about that part of the king's approval, and he simply said he couldn't risk it. Losing a secondary complaint that he would not admit defeat. Ms. Wendy cuts in and says the winner has already been decided, and he should understand. Still defeated, Datarol orders her to stop playing and come to him because he was her master. The girl refuses. Her body and soul belonged solely to her master, who is now the protagonist. Everyone is surprised when the nobleman throws everything against the wall. The ground, surprise erased that, leaving its okay slaves on alert. Unable to stop swearing and complaining that everyone was mocking him, he called, as men instructing them to look after everyone there, without exception. Rilla Reinwick was clearly irritated and said the boy was rude for entering the room without permission. Meanwhile, Wendy felt uneasy around her. Despite everything, her new master told her not to worry because people were there to protect her, including him, Aina, and the dog, which in this case was Luck. Not only that. Shiro arrives and says he also had a cat by his side. Side by side, the three girls are ready to defend their master. They didn't seem afraid of anything when the guys started to admit it. One by one, they were killing the idiots. He hugs Wendy to comfort her, asks if she was scared because he promised to protect her, and admits he is a little scared too. He had no strength or skill to fight. He wasn't very reliable, not good at fighting or strong, but he would make sure he never let go of the little girl's hand. He had wanted to be with her ever since he first met her. Even so, he was captivated by the girl who was now crying. Lateral watches the battle, angry that the men won't fight women and children, and tells them to finish them off soon. His words offend the slaves. It was as if a third person stepped in to ask what the men were doing there. At the outset, Vermello gets into a fight, so things must be serious. Bella Rienrich says she also found the fight unnecessary and that his son began questioning how he would pay for the trafficking. Darwin, the West District supervisor, entered the scene and studied his features. The protagonist was surprised to find the area's supervisor was an old man, and asked why he had a little girl at his side. They were very friendly, by the way. Saying he needs to be informed about the situation for now, the old man calls his son, who trembles in his presence. Not being called Dad left him uneasy, but he couldn't even remember how his son addressed him. He wasn't sure, but signs showed something was very wrong, and he came across as threatening, unlike Bella Rieneric and Yassis. Once he learns they were fighting for Wendy and his son says Suki used dirty tricks for that, but his father grows serious. He said a victory was a victory, and once he lost it, nothing he did mattered because it would be a defeat, and he had taught this very well to Data around. As the man approaches, the old man asks if he was the one who defeated his idiot son, then draws his blade and warns that anyone who comes closer to her master will die. Darwin pretends to be scared, but says the boy had some good moves, leaving Suki nervous. Darwin asks if the boy could ask the little girl to put the sword away because It was impossible to speak that calmly, so if you're interested in this video, please subscribe to the channel. She receives an important reprimand, but Shiro warns that if he makes any wrong move, he will be killed immediately. At last, they felt the atmosphere among those involved. It was not good at all. Rita asks whether anything might have come to help, but Bella Rienrich doesn't care. She had a general idea of the story and realized her son did not accept defeat and was in Despite the terrible situation, the boy keeps insisting his father heard him. Darwin was determined and knew his excuses were irrational given the circumstances. The chubby boy shouts that he is still his son, but the old man says he believes they are not blood relatives. If he had really been his father, he would not have humiliated him that way, so he deserved to die. His words frighten the young man more, and he remembers telling the brat to go all out if he won, and to simply thank and accept defeat if he lost. He asks his adopted daughter Mira to confirm he really said that all the time. Two mistakes marked his life. First, he blamed Yasses for ending the dispute. Second, he fought the Alchemist Guild when he might have had a chance to see them. There was a clear non-aggression policy for slave traders and guilds, so there had to be some. Darwin used the threat of punishment to force Isuki to decide, but the boy did not want to be pressured at that moment. He turns to his friends for help. See you next time, everyone. Texas wants financial compensation for the emotional harm caused by the violence at the salon. If she needs to take time off work to recover physically and mentally, receiving some money would help. He says he will send the bill to Darwin after he discusses it with his wife later. It's a key. He had no idea the man with the mustache had a wife. Darwin already had a headache from the negotiation when he went to Bella Rienrich, who first demanded that they repair the wall they had knocked down. As punishment, she had to sit in the supervisor's chair, which surprised me. Deep down, he already knew what she'd ask, so he argues that the chair would be too much and asks for a break. He suggests it could be a two-person system, as long as he has the authority to modify the credits. Or he would go to the church and report the unrest and the pharmaceutical guild's suspicious dealings. That was a mobile message for Yatsuki. Sarah explains it was about the illegal trafficking the Pharmacists Guild was involved in, and the protagonist was surprised that Dadarol was. By letting this kind of product pass, he created many unnecessary problems after dismantling the dirty business. He would punish him deliberately, because the church would discipline him so severely that he would be unable to sit for a month. The old man orders his son's henchmen to take the idiot home, and he already knew what would happen if the idiot tried to escape or kill himself. To do, it became increasingly clear that this old man truly ran everything. As the protagonist, Darwin punishes him, all of our boys. All he wanted was to get out of there, so he just said that was enough. Feeling punished by luck, he noticed the girl's face. Darwin says she had been giving off a murderous aura behind him for a long time. Itsuki had many good slaves, and the supervisor suggested he wanted to make all of them his slaves, besides Wendy, a very beautiful woman, calling. He led her to his house. Before she could answer, he stepped in front of her and said it was not right to take advantage of her. In that situation, the old man's taste in women seemed as poor as his son's, and Wendy already belonged to him. They ended up tangled together, tense. He refused to let anyone see the girls. It might be. That might seem like a good thing, but boys like him did not live long in that city. Sakai retorts that he came to have fun and enjoy himself, so he would not die even if someone assassinated him. That makes the old man realize he was a traveler between worlds. Again, Itsuki refuses the offer to buy his slaves and repeats that he does not want anything else, only that Dadarol be punished. Bella Rienrich interjects, saying this was more than simply accepting or refusing, and that she did not know how things were done in Itsuki's original world, where the situation was different. It wasn't a real apology unless the person apologizing meant it. Darwin said he could count on him if there was something to reward the girl, and even offered his own daughter, saying she was a good woman. The girl was bold, saying the protagonist seemed like an interesting man and she would not mind that, but she did not know if he could satisfy her. Nervously, he admits he couldn't meet his daughter's needs, so he didn't think he could have a good relationship with her and didn't want to go with the girl. Bella Rienrich cuts in again, telling the boy to make it easier and say what he wanted. Suki thanks for a moment until he finds someone he needs. There was more to do. Later outside, the boy enjoyed a cup of tea. He thanked Rita for her kindness. It was pleasant, but he preferred coffee and sat across the street. Bella Rienrich said that after the accident, problems were piling up in Suki's life. For him, everything was settled, and he wondered whether Bella Rienrich was unhappy with everything he had received. To her, it was just compensation. After all, a bank was now run by two people, and Darwin was planning to rob the team members. Aina and Sword interrupt the two. We tell them Darwin's messenger had arrived. Then the protagonist asks Bella Rienrich for permission, who asks him to stop by when he is free because she has a small job for the boy. Sorte says the boy was very lucky, even though he didn't believe it, and says he normally had to earn money to get things, which Itsuki saw as a man's responsibility. This time the little one had to admit he had done his best, and Aina was also eager for him to arrive. The protagonist was trying to find it on the map. The size surprised them. The boys recognized the house in that world. He couldn't believe it. The girls commented on how beautiful the house was, and Yatsuki was surprised, who confirmed Aina's words that it was true and explained she had been a bit nervous. It was his own house after all. Starting work and renting his own room made him very happy, so he expected to have a house, Wendy. The key question is what she was. He was there to prepare before the master arrived, the protector. In that scene, the protagonist didn't know what to feel. He wanted to be sure the place satisfied him and wondered if he could really have all that. The supervisor stood firm and improved everything around them. The floor had an alchemy room and a bathtub with all the high-quality furniture they would need. He would indeed accept it. They both sealed the agreement, clearing up all the confusion he had with Datarol. After saying goodbye, the old man warned that Yasas would visit him the next day. Now only Itsuki appeared in his sleep. Wendy asks if he wants some tea. While releasing Anna, he wishes her luck in using the rooms as she likes. Disp. Bite unsettled the little one by saying he would arrange her lodging. When she entered the room, a very soft bed greeted her. Definitely the quality was better than the nearby place, and Aina agreed. Darwin had done a great job. The house had a bathtub, and I really wanted to take a bath. He launched the attack, knowing the master would arrive soon, while Suki relaxed in the room inside the new bathroom, and he felt like he was in paradise. There he could finally stretch and clean himself properly. It reminded him of paying to go to a spa, a good moment in the middle of his bloody life. That alchemical refrigerator would probably be worth more than the massager, and then someone offered to help with the boy's back. He gets nervous and asks what she is doing. Someone told me how that would help his back. It left him blushing and turning away. By then his sword was ready to strike, and he insists he could move it out of the way. He thanks her for the help, and today I start by talking about how he made her completely his, which made him very happy. Pleased by it, he was about to move even closer to his master. Sort and Aina walk into the room, and the little one says it was their turn. They surprised both and were reprimanded by Sort. This is a key line meant to explain that it was just a misunderstanding, while the blonde told Aina to close her eyes so she would not see the girl turns away and leaves before she has to do it, leaving Sort sad and nervous because she thinks her friend probably hates her. Itsuki says the Indian was only helping and they had not done anything yet, which meant they were about to. Dana comes back and apologizes, saying that when her master, she helped him bathe because it was her duty as a slave, and she wanted to do it even if only out of obligation. The Indian agrees with the girl, but Sort says Aina did not. He didn't need to worry about that while kicking a key out of his own bathroom. Even so, the redhead was willing to fulfill her. On duty, she slipped while getting ready to throw. Another woman shifts to cover herself, but Sort slaps the master's face and tells him not to look, spoiling his peaceful bath. Meanwhile, at the tree mansion, someone apologized for. They planned to call Mara's father to sort out the problems with Datarol since they did not want to be bothered, but the girl called. That decision was foolish, and forgetting everything her father did for all of them was really stupid. Myra questions how long they would keep mentioning it. Jill apologizes for those things, including being too interested. They were interested in the bum who orchestrated everything and bought the Alchemist Guild's name, Itsuki. Shiro stood on a roof, watching the city. In the palace, a banquet was underway for her master. Entering, she strolls through the hallways. Suki searched for it, and when she finally found it, she was thrilled. She finally finds him, and he is still sleeping. Reports he will reschedule his appointment for the end of the week and asks for a day off. Still, the girl pokes him, giving him a gentle scratch. Something on his head makes him take a while to get up. I was shocked to find it already done. Surprised to find Shiro sleeping beside him, he can't. I couldn't think much about it because another person knocked on the door, and Wendy told him breakfast was ready. Surprised by the little one's presence, she hears her master say that when he woke he found her lying down, which was understandable since she was only a child. A tense moment, Wendy wants to wake her, but Itsuki asks to let the little one sleep a little longer. They end up standing too close and both feel nervous. Later at the breakfast table, they are surprised by the amount of food. Wendy steps up to serve everyone in the group. Softy asks whether she prepared all the food, and the girl confirms. A sense of defeat washed over the blonde after she failed the snack service part. Grateful for the meal, she still felt unsettled, and her comment made Itsuki and Softy pause briefly. Reprimanded for lacking table manners, they return to eating frantically. After the meal, they thank Wendy for the food, and she offers some tea. Her master's praise made her even happier about doing that kind of thing, and Huki even mentioned that the previous day's dinner was as fantastic as the breakfast. His tone makes the softy doubt he is really full, and the man says she does not understand anything. Before explaining that it wasn't an exaggeration to say human well-being is determined by the quality of food, and that the taste of food serves both to please the palate and to protect one's health. Food that did more than fill his stomach could give hope for the next day, so he appreciated Wendy's efforts. In the kitchen, Shiro helped wash the dishes to show gratitude for the meal. Noticing the child staring at her, she asked if something was wrong, and the child said Wendy was different and the food had been much better when they were still at Yasis's house. This surprises the housekeeper a little. Later, Itsaki calls the girls into his room because he has something to give them. To show his gratitude for all they had done for him. Many hands, each wearing a pair of accessories. He had made them himself so they'd know how grateful he was for their efforts. They couldn't tell why the guy was so tense and a bit. The protagonist awkwardly admits he felt embarrassed giving the gifts that way. Wendy and Aina thank him and say they will cherish them. Even the softie drops her tough act, making the guy melt. Aina and Softie have to leave for the mission, and our boy is sad they cannot stay longer. The blonde wanted to gain her freedom quickly so she could stop being a house pet. She falls for one of the master's tricks when he asks for her paw, After the girl protests, he asks Aina to take care of herself and then wishes them well with the job. During the trip, Softie was determined to finally pay off her debt with this mission, which made Anna laugh, but the blonde was serious and said they had to be free before Honey returned, because if Honey found out they were slaves to a man, she would not be happy. This makes the redhead wonder whether her friend was worried about the new master's safety. Still, she was willing to do her best, even though she didn't care much about Itsuki's well-being. Later that day, Wendy and Shiro held their contract ceremony in the present. They sealed Yasis's paths with Itsuki's mark, the same mark the other two had. Over tea, Yasis told the protagonist not to enslave him before signing the contract. He thanks him again for buying Wendy and Shiro, even though he kept apologizing for the inconvenience. The merchant dismissed it and promised the girls would protect their master at all costs and be available whenever needed. Later, one of his subordinates went into the yard to fetch the master. Wendy told him that dinner was almost ready and asked why the master was there. He explains that because his garden was large, he wanted to create a kind of FARA, admitting he had been thinking about it since he moved into the new house. The redhead asks whether the boy usually worked in the fields, and he denies it even though he always did. They wanted to do that. The plan was to plant vegetables and legumes so the housekeeper could cook. Everything seemed tempting, and Shiro felt it could lead to a very happy future for them. The little one was very pleased with her crazy master, who says she was. It was very pretty. He was willing to be happy in that world, and that was his only wish at the moment, something. Later, Wendy interrupts Sick Eyes' rest to say some clients are here to see him. Dharma, Dorothy Maiden's son, arrives unexpectedly at the location. The key is surprised to see guests from the treehouse. After meeting them, someone asks Wendy what the topic will be, but she does not know. Dharma apologizes for the sudden visit and then introduces himself. Sister, meeting the young master will be an honor. He smiled warmly while the protagonist stayed serious. The protagonist did not. He couldn't understand why that handsome guy kept smiling so cynically, and for some reason it irritated him a lot. Housekeepers served tea to the two while they discuss matters. The long-haired man reintroduced himself, saying it was a pleasure to meet the young man before him and that he had overseen construction on his adoptive father's project. Suki took the opportunity to introduce himself, but the young man in front of him already knew him and spoke like a salesman, and then Suki realized he hadn't clearly explained what he needed to be ready to go. About that visit, he says he came to thank and apologize to the young master, which leaves him even more confused, but June explains that the Dadarel case had caused him many problems, so he needed to apologize for the misunderstandings, but Itsuki had already let it go and was now focused on what happened to the chubby guy. Dharma is surprised by how the blonde responds. The protagonist feels uneasy and backs off, saying he doesn't want to hear about his opponent's end after all. Watching the young man closely, the protagonist wondered what standards Darwin used to pick his adopted children, since he and Dadarel were so different. Dharma said the boy did not need to worry about that man because they had already handled the matter completely, so he did not have to come just to apologize and say thank you. The blonde insists it couldn't have happened that way and that he had to come in person, as he really did. It's a key point. Already nervous about being called the young master, he asked the boy to stop. Mary finally speaks up and asks him to be careful because her brother was very gay. The protagonist is left speechless, but Dharma quickly explains that this isn't true and that he doesn't like men, only people he thinks are better than him. There was already an ordinary man in his life, his father, and for now the young master was third. Third, which didn't make things any less awkward. Mary reprimands him, saying the young master was entirely hers, while Itsaki only thought the guy being gay was a huge waste. Still, Dharma stays upbeat and says he hopes that one day Itsuki will realize who he truly likes. In the garden, he asks what the boy thinks of the house and tells him he can speak up about any complaints, but the boy shields himself with a subordinate sticker and says he has nothing to worry about. He was clearly very uneasy about the long-haired man's presence. Changing the subject, Mary asks if the bathroom is also working properly, since she designed the space herself. Overhearing the maids while working, she did her best to please the young master, which made Itsuki happy, though it wasn't surprising, since the Japanese were very particular about bathrooms, and Mary laughed sincerely. The girl asks him not to hesitate to call one of the brothers when he leaves the city, since they will guide him to a place the maids can enjoy too. Watching the girl closely, he saw she had been raised in a good home, but still wondered why she had become the adopted daughter of a man like Darwin. Finally, the two say their goodbyes. He's quite tired from so much interaction. He couldn't think much about it because Shiro's stomach let out a loud growl. They walked to dinner, enjoying a delicious, much calmer meal. In the next room, the young man rests and says he ate too much and couldn't keep stuffing himself like that. Wendy interrupts and asks if he would like to take a bath right then, since she has already prepared everything. Promising she'd be there for whatever he needed, Shiro also volunteers to go to the bathroom. It was funny to see the young man act like a father to the little girl. They play beauty salon as the man rinses Shiro's hair. They seem to be having a great time there. After that, she heads to the huge. She jumps into the bathtub like it's a swimming pool, and when the guy scolds her for swimming there, she doesn't care. Wendy pulls her closer, and the boy is so busy making sure the child stays warm that he doesn't even notice. She was already getting ready when the boy noticed she was there. Still, he avoids looking back so he won't end up with even more now. When he slips at the pool, she is enjoying her moment. Until Shiro announces she is leaving. Leaving only the two of them there. Wendy asks if she could go to the boys' room that night, which he permits. When night falls, the girl keeps her promise. Aki lay there, unable to sleep, just waiting for this. Hearing the knock at the door, he let the housekeeper in. On finding her master, Suki asked for permission, and despite feeling nervous, she decided to go to the bathroom. Bring up the subject and comment on it. The store he went to whenever he got his paycheck. He wanted to take Wendy there someday to try the pork chop and rice they made, and he smiled. She says that if he shared the recipe, she could try making it, even if it did not taste the same, and he promises to teach her next time. He remembered another time, his first date. An awkward silence settled between them. Only when Wendy called for her master. She told him he didn't need to worry so much. After all, she was his slave. At that moment, Itsaki revealed he loved Wendy. He asked if she liked him too, and the little girl confirmed she did. Nervous, she held back from revealing her feelings, but she said she loved him too. So far, her master has been much better than any other man she had ever met. She didn't care that he was a hired slave, because if she were with him, she would. Relieved, she threw herself into the boy's arms, pleading to have her all to himself. They then started playing alone in the room. They were interrupted when someone opened the door, catching both their attention, and it was Shiro, looking confused that this room wasn't the bathroom. Seeing them together, she wondered what Wendy was doing with her master. He said nervously that he was just taking care of her because she felt a little feverish. The girl confirmed that her friend was fine, while Ki pointedly took her to the bathroom. He left the woman in bed, disappointed at daybreak. Our protagonist was exhausted because he hadn't been able to sleep properly. There was little time to rest when Shiro found him and said breakfast was ready. Already seated at the table, the boy accepts another bowl of soup that Wendy offers. Both were clearly blushing, and these warnings say she would be meeting Bella Rianerich for a while. Hitsaik also went to say goodbye to the housekeeper, who had told the boy to be careful. The boy was already leaving. He decided to speak briefly to the girl. He wanted to be clear he would get everything right next time. Andy smiled at that. She asked her master to go and come back safely. Then he left. On the way to the Alchemist's Guild, Bella Rienrich examined one of her potions. He asked if it was okay for him to make a high-level potion, noticing. In a distracted reply, the old woman asked if he was tired of being surrounded by cute slaves, which was partly true. In his case, since they entered his life, he had set everything aside. Rienrich wondered if he should return to his room after what happened with Wendy, which made the crowd. She called him the worst. That was typical for her. The boy was a complete disappointment in her eyes. She asked him to follow her so she could explain something. Before the boy got his game tutorials, she asked him to finish his drink. Only the boy asked whether drinking while it was still light outside was a problem. The woman said it could be a hassle if that was a concern. Over drinks, he admitted he felt insecure about whether Wendy truly liked him, and her servile reply made the woman see his worry as pathetic. Still, it was his chance to be sure of his feelings even if it would hurt. Once Shiro went into the room, he couldn't simply go back, so he ran away. That was a terrible attitude. Bella Rienrich told him to stop putting himself down and to pay attention to what others do. Women were good liars, but it was different when a woman spoke from her own experience or told him to shut the door. They stood him up or left him feeling embarrassed, then changed the subject and said they would get drunk that day to forget their problems. He fell asleep at the table from drinking so much, really. Rita said goodnight to both of them. She covered the boy while she lit her. I watched the pipe closely. The next morning, Itsaki arrived wearing a deeply pitying look, and Iwendi was already braced for it. He hoped for a great return. Preparing tea for the boy, she notes the deep dark circles under his eyes and hopes the drink will help a little. Shiro also steps forward and asks whether the boy did something, since Wendy seemed a little stressed. To remember, it was probably just because of the words he said the day before and because he disappeared afterward. The little girl changes the subject and asks whether her master worked that day. He says he did not, because he still had time before the next potion was delivered and nothing in particular to do. Shiro brightens and asks if she can play with him for a while. Now he faced a choice, help Wendy or stay with the child. The woman cut in and made it clear she did not want help even though she was alone, which was not a good sign for Suki. After that, the slave sulked. The guy realized he'd really messed up, and Shiro calmed him down. The girl was clearly very sad. After all, she had been up all night waiting for her master. Later, he lay down in the garden for a while. Thinking about how he had made Wendy angry, he considered what to do next. Earlier in Japan, a similar situation happened with his girlfriend, and her discomfort grew until they broke up. Flashes of that moment filled the protagonist's mind, and they had even told the woman to stop acting like a child. At the time she replied that if he was an adult, he should keep his promises. It wouldn't leave his mind, and he knew he had to apologize to that person properly. Even if he didn't forgive her, doing it was the right thing. The girl moved faster and went to meet her master. She asked if she could sit there with him. The atmosphere felt strange. They both tried to break the ice at the same time. Sakai stood up awkwardly and apologized to her. He had promised to do everything right but did not keep his word, and he was very sorry. That left the slave speechless for a moment before she laughed. Soon the girl warned him she would forgive him only this once. She approached because she had waited for him a long time. He asked that she not be left alone if something happens next time. He assured them it definitely would not be the case, as the two. When the girl hugged him, the boy felt relieved because it meant she was on his side. Just then, Shiro interrupted them. Someone asked what they were doing, and the protagonist explained they were just making it up. Hungry, she did not care about that. They went inside for lunch, and afterward, he asked about his mission. For her, he explained that he had been protected since he arrived in that world, and asked whether she could protect herself. Then he came up with a cool idea. Using a magic disc and a hammer, he pulled off a trick. Wendy was amazed and asked if it was a unique skill, but he explained it was spatial magic. Arriving there, he thought an item box would be useful, so the goddess gave him one, but he never used it because a friend later gave him a magic bag. Now he can. You could activate this spatial magic to do a variety of things. This included placing himself inside an invisible box. Once inside, he asked Wendy to try to touch him, and she was surprised by an invisible wall between them. Itsuki was eager to show off his abilities, but he still wanted to know if that wall could protect him. He asked Santa to use all her strength to strike the barrier with her weapon. The girl stepped forward without hesitation and came very close. Fortunately, the box held up. He didn't know how many hits it could take. He asked the girl to do it a few more times. The wall shattered into pieces, knocking the boy onto his backside. If he could use that wall freely, it would be a good deal. He could cheat, but he might learn something about magical attacks. Wendy took the lead, admitted she knew a little magic, and offered to teach him if he wanted. He was surprised but declined. Still, the key is accepted. Then she readied herself. Throw it. Water sprayed toward the protagonist. It did not. It took a long time for the wall that protected him to dissolve. It was like wet paper, so it could withstand physical and magical attacks, but it was slightly less durable against magic. Using the wall would at least let her protect herself in an emergency. With the exterminated, Itsuki decides that the group would take a walk around the city that night. This would be a way to thank them for helping during the day, and the two could have some fun together. Deep in the forest, Sort and Ine were still searching for materials. Aina ends up with a goat they found along the way. Causing it to fall to the ground, they finally hunted down all the monsters around them. They could stop to eat. Cooking was clearly not their strong suit. At least the soup was drinkable this time, and the blonde warned her friend she didn't need to force herself to make anything elaborate and could stick to what she usually did, but that wasn't the case. The redhead felt she could not meet the master's demands as a woman, so she wanted to be useful in other ways, which left her colleagues somewhat disappointed, and it was unclear what her former master would think if she saw Aina now. At the second wall, a girl insisted on being let through because she had important business to take care of. One of the guards refused her, saying they had received a message from the border fort to stop her from passing if she went that way. No matter who she was, it was out of the question. Even so, Rengi insisted she had no money, so they would have to let her pass out of pure money. Despite the goodwill, the guys did not give in. This made the girl urge the man to look behind him because something dangerous was there. Even though there was nothing, just create an opening and attack. He quickly takes down one of the guards. Someone else even tries to reprimand her, but that fails, so he blows his whistle to call for backup. Determined, the girl refused to give up because she had to reach Anna and sort things out to help them. At the center of the city, a type of potato was walking through the crowd. It caught our boy's attention, so he told Wendy, who quickly explained it was a moi that might have escaped from someone's garden and said that vegetable was common there. Itsuki was stunned that vegetables could walk in that world. Wendy was surprised that vegetables did not walk in her world. Our boy said only fish with fast legs lived there, which was a bit interesting. Poor Moe couldn't walk far because Shiro had stuffed it into her mouth while saying she was hungry. Apologizing for not having fed the girl yet, he asks what she would like to eat. They promise to eat meat until they were bursting at the seams. Itsuki asks Wendy if there's a good place nearby, and she tells him to leave it to her. The three walk together like a single, large fan. The family is there, and the woman even takes the protagonist's hand, making him quite nervous. Everything at the restaurant is pleasant, and Shiro always enjoys being around food. The search for Renge continues. She keeps running to escape the guards performed parkour at a professional level. All three were leaving the restaurant, and Itsuki wondered how so much food could fit into someone so small. It was time to go home, however. Jade had other plans, so Renga missed her aim and fell on top of the protagonist, causing a major commotion in the city center. Renga was already ready to protect her master when the city guards told her to be quiet, and this time she achieved a great victory. It threatens to hurt its Ikki if the guards come any closer. Quietly, she apologizes to him and asks for a little cooperation, explaining she was trying to help her friends and will need help to do that. He explains when he becomes very worried and when Shiro is about to strike but her master shouts. He says he's fine and asks the woman to take the little one home. Although the two disagree, the man's expression comes through. Meanwhile, the guards keep insisting the girl can't keep running away like that. He asked the stranger to lead him to the alley on the right, and she complied despite the guards trying to follow them. The boy comes up with a better plan and uses his level 3 magic to form a barrier in front of. He made the guys stop in their tracks. They had no choice, they were completely confused about what it was, and it was unclear whether Suki even apologized for what he had to do. Now it was time to leave. On top of one of the buildings, Shira watched everything closely, remembering Wendy's words. It turned out her master had asked to be left alone, but still needed someone to make sure he would be okay. She chose to follow the end. I ended up entering one of those bars with several very affectionate beetles. Someone apologizes for the delay and hands the drinks to the pair, while another leads a group of guys, including you and me. The two strangers fall silent and keep staring, and the girl uses the pause to ask whether that was a forbidden club. Extremely embarrassed, she argued that he had no right to bring her there, and that if he was thinking of doing anything with her, he should reconsider, but that wasn't what Itsuki wanted. Guards would not reach this place, and the protagonist wanted to know why the girl beside him was chained. She says she had no grain, so she went through the toll without paying. At last, Renga introduces herself and says her friends were in trouble. She was a Vadarara and she was. She was part of the Red Front, made up of her friends Aina and Sort. She says she received a letter from Sort some time ago, saying they had been enslaved by a pervert. She hands the paper to him. It calls Itsuki a real thug and says he stared at the two every day with a disgusted look. Renj says that was exactly why she had to save them. Itsuki tells her to calm down and listen, then reveals that he was the person in the letter. Unfortunately, a worker there commented that he was the man everyone was talking about who had turned the girls from the Red Front into slaves. This causes Renj to lunge at the man's neck. Julio was already full of hatred and ready to go for the gun. Who had enslaved his closest friends? A few months earlier at the Adventurers Guild, Aina and Sorta were nominated, Ferris explains. Regular requests from Hikaku had kept coming, and this one was a nomination for Renj, as usual. Sort studied the paper closely and confirmed it was true. Apparently they would have to face an earth dragon, so they needed to. Renj was already used to this, so she could finish the mission alone and return. Sort felt a little worried, but her friends said it would be as easy as taking candy from a baby. Anyway, the blonde asked her friend to stay alert and be careful because she could be careless at times. She set off on the mission. The destination city was very hot. The girl arrived there with only her gear. Residents were very happy to see her, especially a group of children. The little wolf was happy to be reunited. She hadn't seen them for a long time. After the greetings, the girl noticed one of the children was injured. The boy said it was because of an earth dragon. He and his father were attacked on the way home. His father hurt his leg, and his mother was struggling to work while breastfeeding. The warrior tells the little boy to lift his head and asks him to give something to his father. Then she hands a small bag of coins to the child. She says she remembered owing him and apologized for the long delay in paying. She sends a hug to the old man and reaches for a snack because her stomach is growling. Taking the opportunity, she gives something to the children too. Then they share some snacks after that, the warrior went to the city's Adventurers Guild and found an old man. Apologizing, he said most people were out after the dragon incident, so if it was a request he couldn't help, and when he realized who she was he visibly relaxed at her presence. He apologizes for sending her so far away, and Renj apologizes for bothering him right after she arrived. She asks him to look for any equipment and information that might help her. Reports suggested a survivor from the Earth Dragon's first appearance, or that it hatched from an egg left behind. A whole group of local adventurers and watchers tried to defeat it, but the dragon's skin was very tough, normally after a while. After finishing attacks on people, it would hide in the sand to sleep and then move to the next hunting spot, which had been out of their control for a long time, and the news said that spot was in the area of the city. The old man believed there were 3 of them, and they last appeared 5 days ago in an oasis. In the south, it was lucky the girl had gone alone, and now she watched her ambush, which was in a terrible mood. It takes a long time for the earth dragon to emerge from beneath the sand, heading toward what it thought would be a human. After 3 days of watching these creatures, she saw one for the first time. It was time to act, and she was set on turning that creature into real prey. Already holding Itsuki, Ine called for Luck to take a bath, but Luck said she had to finish something. First, she was writing a letter to keep Renj informed about everything happening with them. Inside, the little one hoped her friend had done the same, because no one had heard from her since she left. Her colleagues seemed to be handling the dragon very well. If not for her far greater skills than expected, the creature's claw nearly knocked her to the ground. She knew it would be tough, but if that was the case, the next attack would be far better. The girl moved in on the creature's neck and grabbed its skin without hesitation. Bring it down to the ground and defeat it, believing that only 2 remained. 2 weeks later, she went to the nearby oasis to cool off and then returned. She cleaned the city, explaining it took longer than she expected to do everything, and even so the children thought it was amazing. Having defeated all the earth dragons on their own, everyone in the city was very grateful too. She was very happy, Even the boy remarked that his father, thanks to Renga, would soon be able to walk. They were happy. At the Adventurers Guild, the old man apologized for not being able to give her the full reward now and promised to send it later. The warrior left the processing of the corpses to the other man because it was not an easy job. Then she remembered a letter had arrived for her. The man said it came from her hometown, and when she realized it was just luck, she became even more curious. Reading the paper, she felt only hatred. Now in an emergency, she had to get out of the. Clearly, she had been very busy. They came from the city, unable to believe that Aner and Luck had become slaves. She'd save them both without thinking twice about that guy, who now stood in front of her. It narrowly avoided being hit. If Shiro hadn't stopped her and said she would kill her if she tried to act against her master. Reng kept shouting for Paralha to move aside, but Shiro refused to budge. Both were already heading toward ignorance and the older. Everyone insisted the younger one was in the way. Inside, customers and workers were tense because of the fight. When one of the guys asked what the two were doing, Shiro used the moment to try to hit the girl. She managed to defend herself, shattering, hold it parallel and high to the blade. It surprised her, but she still tried to kick her, and was thrown through the air by the older child, who said the girl was very annoying. She nearly knocked into one of the women working there, who was already about to fall to the ground. That did not happen because Shiro used the girl for support. Resume fighting Renge, which the red-haired girl wasn't intimidated at all, since Shiro was very easy to her. She tried to punch the girl, however. Paralha managed to dodge while hitting, put the girl on the head instead, who eventually fell to the ground. Shiro was fine with that. At last she could take the enemy down and end her once and for all. Instead, someone grabbed her wrist. Aki explained that she didn't need to do that. After all, she was Aina's companion. Luck left the little one speechless. Even lying on the ground, Renge made the situation worse by repeating what the boy had just said. It was precisely for that reason that she had to save the two girls. The last part surprised Kitsuki, and he called Shiro to give them something out of this world. Talking to Rengi at that moment was pointless, but he still had to manage to talk to Anna and Luck so they could explain the situation. So the pair tried to leave, stopped again by another of Renge's tricks. Shiro told her master to step back and said she would handle the girl for now. He also promised her he would not try to finish her off completely if he could. As he left, the man apologized and said he'd been counting on the little one, who was too focused on the fight to respond. Reng summoned a magical power and left the child very frightened. This time, the woman would make sure the little girl could not get away from her. When she summoned the needles, Shiro realized she was in a very difficult position. A wall of needles was forming between them. Its reach is so vast that it even affects the protagonist, holding him there amid those things that hurt too much. Juice dripped from his hands, then he fell. The pain was so severe I could barely move. Shiro stops fighting and runs to his master to care for him. The girl screams several times asking him to wait until Renji arrives. Someone tells her to move aside, and Yasus finally arrives at the. She stopped the girl in the hall, using this. The strength of his men is clear as they surround her with spears aimed at her. Meanwhile, Shiro keeps caressing his master. Yasus came only because he heard his clients were in danger. Instead, he found a complete mess. Wendy had already arrived at the scene and asked permission to meet Hitsuki. The scene she found shocked her. She grabs the boy and pleads with him to hold on. He tried to show him that he was in a lot of pain. The maid was desperate. Meanwhile, Reng's angry expression did not waver, even though he kept getting a little bit angrier over and over. Yasus tried to calm Wendy, saying they needed to give first aid. Then he went to the man with the potion. Pouring medicine over her master's wound, the girl warns it will hurt a little. Reng stands surrounded by guards carrying out an arrest, and one of them readies handcuffs and tells her not to resist. As the girl began to move, they grew even more nervous. She had summoned another one of her magic circles. This time she would use it to turn that ground into quicksand and catch the guards by surprise, who quickly sank into a large mud puddle. Coming out of there unhurt, the girl was already ready to charge the boy and end this once and for all. She could think of nothing but finishing him off, but the Endio would protect him. Unable to attack someone uninvolved, she silently hoped the girl protecting the other would stop. Guy with her absorbed in her feelings, Shiro seized the chance to follow her. He knocked her down before she could reach her master. No pity showed in her gaze when she They finally landed, with the girl face down on the ground. Renj was fully compromised. Yasus seizes the opportunity to detain her and thanks Shiro for all the help. Nothing else mattered to the girl. She wanted to help her master in any way she could. Indio orders the guards carrying him to bring him to the Adventurers Guild, which piques Yasa's curiosity. The church or clinic would be better places, but the girl argued her master's potions would be there, and it was closer, which made a lot of sense. One of the guards asks the merchant what to do with Ringe, and the merchant tells them to take her to his mansion. At last they reached the Adventurers Guild. Did everything possible to heal the master, who is bandaged up now. When he woke up at last, everyone was relieved. Itsuki looked a little confused about why he had come to the guild, and Wendy explained they had rented a place to treat her master. Shiro quickly threw herself into Itsuki's arms, shouting. Joy combined with non-stop apologies left him feeling lost again. The little one says he couldn't protect his lord, which is why he was hurt, and this makes Itsuki smile. He quickly adds that without the child things would be much worse now, and that's why he wanted to thank her. And Wendy as well, taking the chance to apologize for causing her worry, which, the chat did happen, the bald man admits it. When the young women brought him, they were very nervous because there was a hole beside the boy's belly. The slave says he healed the wound with potions he made himself, but it will probably leave scars. One of the adventurers asks who did this to the young man. Remembering he needed to talk to Aina and Sort, he wondered if they had returned, but they hadn't, and asked if Shiro knew what happened to the girl. At that moment, Aina enters the guild and explains that her friend was imprisoned in Lord Yuli's mansion. Her sadness was obvious and important. He celebrates her return because he really wanted to talk to him. Her only response was apologies for the incident with her friend. The bald man is confused because she is apologizing. The redhead then explains that Renge was the attacker. The master was well known to the men there. She also tells Wendy she used to be part of her group, but this makes the slave even more confused, since a friend of Aina would have no reason to do that. A long sermon warns that one wrong move could have put the master's life in danger. Amid the confusion, Itsuki realizes that luck was not on her side. The girl says she was busy with something else. Meanwhile, at Yas's mansion, the girl was held captive because she had not paid the tower. They broke the gate, injured guards, destroyed an establishment, and attempted to kill its secret. That last part makes the girl a little worried about him, but Yas quickly says he is being treated right now and will be back. That would be fine, but it would not be the same for the girl. She struggled against the chains, even though it was her efforts were useless because she could not break them. They were made of a special copper. It was designed to capture high-level monsters, and she couldn't even use her magic. Yasses began to wonder what use she could have for the girl, who grew increasingly angry about her situation. Then Luck arrived. Screaming for her friend's life, she saw her. A friend stood on the shore in the harsh sun, and the two stared at each other tensely. Luck asks Yasses to be less cruel than Renge, but he interrupts her. He said one of his warehouses was almost destroyed, and the girl's master nearly killed, so Renga was the cruel one there, and it all happened by chance. If I hadn't sent that letter to Miss Delinquent, nothing would have happened. Her words were harsh but true. Yasses wouldn't let her say a word. Knowing she would say she didn't want to do that, he saw the result right in front of their eyes. Yass's key business partner was nearly killed, and his companion became a criminal. Luck's fault was to blame. Renge finally speaks up and tells her to stop. Question. Figuring out why Luck should take the blame. Having caused the damage, she felt no regret because she would do anything to protect Luck and Aina. Her luck ran out, revealing the situation wasn't what she thought. Actually, neither she nor Aina had ever been in a situation like the one described in the letter she sent. Ranga was confused. The girl kept apologizing. Yasses steps in and says the two had entered into a slavery contract with the boy because of a debt. Because of the damage the adventurers caused, the two took the blame on behalf of the guild. Despite their issues, they knew their relationship was good. That letter's content was completely false. The sad part was that if he had read all the letters, none of it would have happened. He shows a paper that was a continuation of the letter the girl left at the other city's guild. He said it had been sent from there today, but it was already a bit late. They had to get back to business. Luck was partly to blame for that situation. She knew how the business would run. Flashbacks of the first time she saw Suki crossed her mind. Always smiling, he kept placing himself between her and her friend, which made her feel a little jealous. She disliked the way Aina smiled at him and felt her place had been taken, so she wanted him to leave the two of them as soon as possible. He still didn't reject her, even when she was hostile. He wasn't a bad person, yet she felt so ashamed she decided to write that stupid letter showed how foolish she was in trying to put an innocent person in danger. At Yassis's feet she cried for forgiveness, accepted full responsibility, and said she would do anything to make amends. Already begging Renga to forgive her, since he had nothing to do with this, but the girl was not. She grew nervous and told Luck to stop, because that man was a slave trader and she couldn't go around saying. She yelled that she alone had done those things and did not care about the letters. If anyone deserved punishment, it was her. Still, Luca cries and apologizes, saying she did that even though the girl had been so kind. That explained why she felt deeply sorry. Her tears would not stop, it was. At that moment Yassis stepped in and said that, as expected of the Red Front adventurers, their bonds were very strong. Crying and throwing a tantrum won't help, and the two of them need to learn that. Follow the laws and accept the board's recommendation of a slavery contract as punishment for committing a crime. The girl would probably become very popular in the new market she was about to enter because she was a famous adventurer. Protesting would not help, her actions were a crime there, and he could do nothing, so he would let the labor law take its course. Everyone is surprised by Itsuki, who apologizes for the interruption. He had a response to all that. Even the tears of Luck stopped at that moment, as I stared at him in disbelief. Suki says it won't hurt him, but the merchant might be affected. He is pleased that his valued customer is feeling well. The protagonist emphasizes that it was thanks to the old man's action. Surprised to find Luck there, he sees the girl start trembling again as she tries to explain what she did. She admits she shouldn't have done those things, feels deeply sorry, and apologizes to her master. That meant nothing to him. He would complain about the letter's content later. He now wanted to help her and Randy. He hugs her and asks her to leave everything to him. She finally agrees. From afar, Renj could see that things were not what they seemed in the. Suki asks Yassis to lift Reng's restrictions for now because he couldn't handle this kind of thing. She was a dangerous criminal, and he couldn't do that. Still, the boy insists he didn't need to speak to him that way. The merchant argued there was nothing to say since the law would decide, and Itsuki said he would accept responsibility for the damage and reimburse the boy for his shop. He would also pay an extra fee to apologize if he could resolve it more effectively. The old man is left speechless. Having narrowly escaped death, he wanted to ask forgiveness from the person who tried to kill him. Although he was kind-hearted, it still couldn't be done, leaving Itsuki indignant because the victim had asked for it himself. He would also compensate the merchant. Aina says she asked him because she was also responsible for the incident and would do everything she could to compensate the merchant. Regarding him, Yassis asks whether she is the criminal instead of her friends, and the girl replies that if that is what it takes to forgive the two, then you. She confirms this exactly, and our boy agrees, but he had misunderstood everything. The slave owner's apology was not enough. The compensation was not enough for him to forgive. Yassis says sinners must always be punished regardless of the reason. The girl should face justice, so order is maintained. As a resident of that city, he followed the law. An order, he wanted his friend to do so willingly. Give up as a citizen, Itsuki thought that man was completely crazy. Yet as a merchant, he wanted to know what he thought. That leaves Yassis a little confused. Now it's your turn. Suki says he was a nomad and knew many things they did not have there, which to him was a waste of. Beyond money, he saw potential in alchemy, but the mustache man didn't understand where his friend was trying to go. This key point explains that he could make a unilateral loan with him. Although many questions remained, he still wanted to try to strike a deal with the merchant version of that man. When opposing someone in a game, he didn't care how it was played as long as they agreed on the conditions. If Itsuki won, he wanted him to forgive Renj and to love. Yassis says he did not have the authority to do that, while Suki says the Yassis she knew had plenty of authority. Fed up with the discussion, the man with the mustache says he can handle it that way to some extent, but he wants to know what risks the protagonist will face. He had something to lose too, so he would run. Our boy says that if he lost, he would become his slave for the rest of his life, surprising his maids, and even Renga herself did not understand what the boy meant, since she could not imagine why someone like him would do that for someone like her. After a moment's thought, the boy replies that the girl was like family to Aina and Luck, and that mattered greatly. He then remembered that the boy even helped her at several points during her performance. He felt like a complete idiot. Shiro draws her master's attention, wanting to know if he'll really be okay. She couldn't protect him inside the game. Itsuki, who thought that if he didn't relax he would lose. The girl does not respond. Her confidence in her master was strong. All of this makes Yases laugh. Before he accepted the challenge once and for all, Joran. This is a big step for the protagonist. When asked about the terms, the merchant says it will be like the game he played with Dadero. As before, the first to hit 120 million in a week would win. If the boy could do that to compensate for the store, he would win. Help from the Adventurers Guild and the Alchemists was forbidden, and selling anything that shared those rights was banned. The merchant would let the Red Front people cooperate because they were involved in the incident. The terms were fair for the protagonist, and for now Sort and Rang would stay in his custody. After they finally left, they were exhausted. Quickly, Renjit calls for the boy. She apologized again, even though she knew she could not be forgiven for all she had done. Surde also warns that her friend was not at fault, that the blame was entirely hers, and apologizes. The boy pinches her chubby cheeks to comfort her, telling her she could tell him about any complaints because they were friends. It was the first time the girl acknowledged that. Renga didn't have to worry because Itsuki's injuries were fully healed, and he was better than ever, while Ine felt very sorry for letting that happen. Everything was settled for the protagonist, so he could go home and rest for now. She welcomed him with joy on her face, even though she was clearly angry. He says he's sorry for leaving the woman alone again. The maid notices Reng and confirms her identity, only to be slapped in the face afterwards. Relieved, the girl calls her master so everyone can go have breakfast, including Ranger. He tries to speak to her, but she only says she didn't want to be left alone again, and he apologizes more. Nothing more could be done to undo what had happened. Apparently, a quiet life was out of reach for Itsuki. 7 days remained until the final result against Yases. Locked away, the protagonist worked on his accessories and could not rest for even a minute. He kept the condition of not receiving help from the Adventurers Guild and the Alchemists in. No matter how many accessories Itsuki made, they were like a grain of sand in the desert, and he also could not sell the massager, which was more. His venture was profitable. The money he had raised covered half the expenses, but he still needed $60 million. Shiro notices his master and asks where he's going, and the master says he's just going to the bathroom. He considered clearing his head for a bit before returning to work, and Shiro decided too. Seeing her there, the boy says Wendy said she had problems because she was stealing food. The little one says she was starving, but still needed to show restraint. At that moment, our boy was surprised to see Aina and Sort. There, she was already prepared to take a beating, and Sort was ready to hit. After she stopped trying and simply asked, "Do not look at it." That was very strange. When he commented on it, the girl tells him to, telling him to shut up and throwing the bucket toward him, murmuring that he was a complete idiot. Meanwhile, Shiro moved closer to Renj, requesting help to wash her hair and perform other personal care tasks. She did it very carefully, taking advantage of the fact. She said it had been just the two of them, apologized for yesterday, and made sure the little girl was okay. She made it clear she wasn't hurt and took the chance to praise Rengus. Still, she shouldn't worry because a strong hit wouldn't kill her, and she was pretty tough. A girl outside, Aina tried one of Wendy's treats. It was a great little cookie too. Company tea also served for travel, and she would give some to the girl to take on the next mission. Noticing Aina's expression, Wendy asks what is wrong, and Aina explains that she was very amazing. She apologized because, even though she was a slave, she wasn't as useful as the other woman. As a member of the Red Front, she should have handled it herself but let the master take care of it. That left Aina feeling pathetic, but Wendy questions that. She had even tried to give her body and soul to Itsuki and would do anything. She only wanted him to tell the truth, but the master did not allow it. That is why she felt a little disappointed. Believing some things only Aina could do made the warrior a little more cheerful. 5 days before the delivery, the protagonist was exhausted. At top speed in the workshop, he could only make a few items and would need Anna and the other girls to collect more materials, so he had to find another way. If he kept going like this, he would become a creepy old man's comfort. Asking Darwin for help crossed his mind, but that could make things worse. Whatever the case, he had to act and was lost in thought when Wendy announced that a guest had arrived. Mary, Darwin's daughter, sat there as if they were old friends. She couldn't help noticing he was nervous, even though he hadn't done anything. She said she had heard about the incident at the Bloor Hotel. She found it interesting, but he did not. She even knew she had to get money, so she was there to see if he had managed to get everything. The boy explained it was quite hard to get, and she felt sympathy for the story. He was already looking at himself. As a traveler, he likely bore a few scars from the goddess. He had skill, but being his friend wasn't exactly a good thing. Help, only Mira doubted that the boy had learned any new skills. Thinking it over, Itsuki decided to check his guild card. It listed every active and passive skill the boy had. The alchemy skill level had grown considerably by the time he noticed the molding and forwars. From the materials on his table, he understood what it was about. True to its name, the skill duplicated items, but the copy was flawed. Manual molding, by contrast, was a skill for shaping materials freely based on the practitioner's alchemy level. This allowed him to make unique products faster using the mold and also passively by forging them. He could have used that skill on the massager, but it was forbidden this time. Now he only had to figure out how to sell what he made and which materials to use for producing large quantities in a short time, and he remembered Mira's words about him being a traveler. Calling his maids into the room, he asked a favor that left them curious. Eager for him to spill the beans. Only he asked them to calm down before saying what he wanted, then asked them to collect the items on a list that shouldn't be very different. He had to ask immediately. One of them should move away from the other two. Luck had already started to comfort Aina, saying she would do her best, but Itsuki had something else to say. Renj and Luck left together, and Aina said they would return before dawn. He gave Wendy a small mission, and she accepted it gladly. Acceptance meant it was time for him to get busy. He repaired what he already had at home, using forgery and hand molding. Still, doing that much in a single day felt like it could kill him. Those potions packed as much sodium as an energy drink. At day's end, all that remained was to sell tomorrow. Noticing the master was exhausted, Wendy covered him so he could have a minimally comfortable night. 4 days before the deadline, he summoned his subordinate. He had prepared all the products, and all they had to do then was sell to. The team would work together to handle them. In the city center, a long line formed to buy those products, and the crowd kept growing because people were curious. A group went over to look, while other women stood captivated by it. A parade seemed to be happening there. The models were Reng, Ine, and Luck. This is a key way to get customers to look at this type of accessory. Introduce them through the group of red-fronted adventurers. They assured that they were not only comfortable, but also came in a wide variety. The design made the ladies look even more stylish. He said it was originally an accessory made from costly ore, but they were offering a big discount. The girls were almost ready to fight to get the sales seemed to be going very well, and the city's women were becoming increasingly. The excitement faded when Mira arrived to check on her friend, and she was glad she'd helped clarify his ideas a bit. Limiting the design to women, she had her colleagues wear it, sparking demand. Because it was a decisive short-term battle, she expected it to sell very well. Girls in that world were drawn to shiny things. The boy thanked the girl for letting the protagonist use her sales salon. That didn't matter. If he had to thank anyone, it would be Adela, someone Itsuki definitely did not want to owe. Luck cut into the conversation to ask which accessory grants resistance to poison, and then Suki said goodbye, saying he owed a girl we found very intriguing. After 3 more days of making and selling everything over and over, the deadline arrived. With his team's help, Itsuki finished the fundraising. He had to especially congratulate Wendy because the design council was very helpful in making the accessory for the 3, and this made her very happy because she loved being used too. The boy goes to Yas's mansion and delivers all the money he promised, surprising the man with the mustache. His team checked and confirmed the 120 million was there, leaving nothing to discuss, and Sort and Renj would be released as innocent. Yasis tried to invite the boy to dinner, but he already had plans. At the Adventurers Guild, the young man gave a heartfelt toast. Sort was already moving toward a better place and had even begun to cry with emotion. Her behavior seemed out of control, but it was just the alcohol talking. Gamegay approached the master, unsure what to say, but she wanted to apologize properly now that it was over, only for Itsuki to extend a cup toward her. He reassured her that everyone was safe in the end, and that was enough for him. The girl felt very grateful. Using his forgery skills, Itsuki continued making his potions and had finally finished the motifs. When he realized his level had gone up again. Now his skill course covered the experience circle. After a while, he became quite stressed doing his calculations. Shiro noticed and asked why he looked serious, and he said that because his family had grown, expenses had risen and he would have to work more. Wendy overheard and asked him to let her know if he needed help because she could work too, but he was proud and felt his duty was to provide for the other girls in the house. Still, the maid said the young man could talk to her if he had problems, because she just wanted everyone to be happy. When he stopped by the Alchemy Guild, he asked Bella Rienrich for a job, and she told him to stop using that odd voice. The potions were popular, so the noblewoman could help sell them. She warned him not to get distracted by women or neglect his training. There was one small point he wanted to discuss about that, so he told her about his experience circle, saying his alchemy level had risen and he had learned manual molding and forgery. Now he could recreate an item he'd made before by skipping the initial steps and simply reproducing it. Bella Rienrich interrupted him to ask if he had shared the new skill with anyone, and he had not, so she told the young man to keep it to himself. Impressed by the skill, she knew there were few alchemists at level 9, so if he wanted to keep that skill, it was better to keep this a secret. The boy nodded in agreement. The noblewoman told him to go home and start working because she needed about 500 potions in 3 days, which surprised him. Itsuki found his sister demanding, but he felt he was maturing there. Bella Rienrich's point made sense to him, even at his old company. As his skills grew, the bosses exploited employees without a second thought. Despite the conversation ending slightly awkwardly, being an alchemy apprentice was a pleasant experience. A girl running past interrupted his thoughts and told him to get out of the way. He wasn't that fast, so the two tumbled and fell to the ground. She ended up on top, feeling completely embarrassed. He shouted sharply. The little one asked if the boy was all right, but he told her to get off first. She tried but went the wrong way. After the embarrassment faded, the protagonist checked the girl was unharmed and told her to stop running down the slopes to avoid serious injury. The stranger wasn't paying much attention and asked if the boy was a drifter because he gave that impression. Seizing the chance, she introduced herself as Origal and said it was a pleasure to meet Itsuki. She said she lived closer to the city center but was still somewhat far from it. Her grandfather was the lord of that place, so she came from a very wealthy family. Information from his family proved very useful to the boy. Then he realized it was better to ask the girl to keep what had just happened between them a secret. Someone might ask where they were going, but Itsuki was already heading home. She decided they'd keep their date until he reached his destination, ignoring what the boy said. The girl was curious about the lumberjack coming to the city, and he said the people there were lively and looked happy. The world he lived in before wasn't bad, but it felt a bit uncomfortable for our boy, who now smiled much more. Not everything there was good, because many people were frightening and a bit extreme. Since he arrived, everything had been pretty fun for him. There were hard moments, but everyone worked, ate, drank, and laughed together. That explains why he liked that place so much. Origal's eyes shone when she heard that, and she thanked him, leaving the protagonist confused. Then the little girl says she had lived there since she was born, so she was happy someone else liked the place. She says goodbye and thanks the boy for the day. He warns her she will want to come back if she keeps running around like that. Meanwhile, Yasis climbed down from her cart and asked the driver to wait. She asked him to tell the Lord that she had arrived at her home. He provides all the details about the incident with Renga and how he resolved it with the victim. Even so, the Lord says they could not let the girl go without giving her a position. They could consider the man's wishes about the incident. She knew Itsaki was special because even Yasis helped him resolve the issue. The merchant said they had old connections, and he was a very interesting person, though sometimes a bit illogical. That was why they thought the boy was so special, and at least it was surprising that the girl was interested in someone like him. For her, it felt natural to ask about someone so interesting, and her words make the merchant suspect that they had on. They had already met, and the girl says it was more or less like that, then reveals she is an oracle and that the boy could be her type, which leaves the mustache man incredulous. The moment ends quickly when the girl starts coughing. Fit indicated her health was not very good, and she had to agree. The situation was worse than it seemed, and her plan might not work. There was no way to avoid it, so she was working on the transfer of. Even the merchant daydreams about who she might recommend. That makes her quite curious. Now was not the time to think about those things, so she up. Ending the meeting, the woman asks the man to leave and wishes him a good day. Left alone in the vast room, Origal is overcome by sadness. More time would have let her get to know the city. Feeling better, Wendy and Renge were hanging up the clothes at Itsuki's mansion. However, the wind was very strong there, the girl even. She apologized for asking the warrior to help with the household chores. It was fine with her because she was free. She asked whether Aina and Sadi were going to the guild that day, and Rengi confirmed they were because the guild master had summoned them. She couldn't help noticing how beautiful Wendy was. By noon, their master was waiting in the workshop, so they could take a short lunch break. When do you usually set the items on the table? Sharing the meal with Renge made her very happy. He wondered who was enjoying that food. The warrior couldn't help staring at the other girl. That made Wendy question whether she hadn't matched her palate, even though it was very good. She couldn't stop thinking about the maid's slap. She suddenly stood up and apologized to Wendy. It dawned on her that she had never formally apologized for making the girl go through something very annoying. They hadn't known each other long, but she could tell from the look that Itsuki was very important to her, and her face did not always show the submissive expression of a slave before a master. A master Reng tried to kill because of Ine and luck. That made her feel very sorry and left Wendy speechless. She paused before saying it was all right because the master had already accepted and forgiven her in that house. Because she loved her master, the maid also forgave her. Ranga felt bewildered and couldn't dwell on the apologies because Wendy had warned that Ranga seemed a bit careless and should be more careful. When she finished tidying up, Wendy asked her new friend to bring the food to her master. He became so absorbed in his work that he forgot to eat or sleep. It was even funny at that point. While washing the dishes, she couldn't help herself. Consider the love she felt for her master. Each time those words left her mouth, her heart went with them. The master always found a way to touch her. He listened to her heart, but he hadn't touched her body since the incident. She needed proof, evidence that he had to love her or she would keep feeling insecure. Realizing she had been a bit foolish for that, she knew it's a key part of good care. Noticing the girl lost in thought, Shiro calls to get her attention and asks where it hurts. The little one wraps her in a hug, comforting her even without knowing why she felt that way. Meanwhile, Itsuki buried his face in his office. In books, he found a very complex method for making pinesia, but the manufacturing process was not written there. Reports said a secret remedy could restore lost limbs, cure diseases, and lift curses, and he wanted to know if the experienced circle could do all that instantly. Focusing his magic, he brings a new potion to life. He wasn't sure if it was exactly what he was looking for. Apparently, they had developed a secret medicine that removed negative conditions, but did not extend life or slow aging, and Range arrived just then. Startled, the boy asked whether something was wrong, but she says the Indian asked her to bring lunch. Something his master thanked her for, only now he was very. He focused on figuring out why he could do those things and whether he could trust his slaves to share this power. At least he understood his abilities, since he had never made a miraculous remedy and could not see how he would suddenly make one. The potion was called Goddess's Service, and it was very strange that he could make it. Shiro watched him work in silence, trying to understand the situation. He left his office after a while and decided to keep his abilities to himself for a year. Soon after, Wendy showed up. Thank her for the delicious lunch and say he was free that afternoon if the girl needed any help. She declines and asks him not to waste his time. After all, she had already spent a long time meeting the maids. The girl considers mentioning something. She soon gives up and invites him to tea. He follows her, unsure what to say. At last, Aina and Sort came back from their hunt, completely exhausted. Itsuki asks what happened to the two, but first they needed a bath, which quickly revives Type A. Once that was settled, Suk asks again what had happened. Ine then tells them they got a request from the guild, which surprises the others. The mission was to capture a monster that had escaped from a merchant, a modal variant of the Vorpal rabbit. A unique creature had human-level intelligence and could communicate with other monsters and animals. Ine says the creature was alarmingly fast, slipping away from Sort and her in seconds. The blonde was extremely angry while it was Akidi's her. Determined, she promised to catch that cheeky rabbit next time. So the red line would need to return to its original formation with Renga. Although it felt a bit strange, the protagonist wished them good luck and asked that no extreme situations arise. Then Sorta asked for the help of the child who lived with them. She wanted Cairo to be borrowed for a while. She was very strong and agile. Once Itsuki agrees, they take the little. The girl left, leaving only him and Wendy at home. The woman says it looks like she'll only have to make dinner for two. They thought better of it. It had been a long time. Because the protagonist was alone with the girl, they enjoyed dinner and laughed a lot. Later, he thought about the moonlight and could not calm down. Every time they were alone, it felt like the first time. Feeling like a high school teen full of hormones, he still remembered his promise to do things the right way for himself. Today was the day to add. It stuck in his head, even in the shower. Brushing his teeth and preparing to meet the. She was a girl, and he even knocked on the door. Overcome by despair, after all, he didn't even know if Wendy was okay with. Men were brutal, and he was not like them. On the verge of giving up, he was taken by surprise by the girl who wasn't in her. In the room, she wanted to know how she could help him. Too nervous to speak, Itsuki stayed silent and called him in. They sat at the table in an awkward silence. She tries to break the ice by offering tea and gets up to make it. The boy pulls her hand and asks her to wait. She didn't give him what he wanted, he says. Following up on a promise he made earlier, he asked if she was still interested. Blushing slightly, Wendy still confirms. She had always wanted them to be together, to give him everything she had and stay close, and she was about to confess her feelings. How she felt when the boy kissed her, even so she could have. Stop dwelling on how much she loved. It was her master. In the moonlight, they kissed like passionate lovers. The girl grew more and more excited. After Itsuki broke the mood, things still felt awkward, so he apologized for acting so suddenly. She hugged him and asked him not to apologize. They both went to bed to play an interesting game. Whenever he wore a beautiful outfit, Itsuki always complimented him. They lie down to continue the first phase of the game. It's the key that taught her to press her buttons to gain some skill. They stayed tangled up there for a long time. The girl was delighted by the way they were playing, and her master's quick movements made it even more fun. She called his name without hesitation when she needed help, and he answered. Keep things the same so they both keep having a blast all night. Suki felt confused when she woke up. He rose with the sun shining on his face. He found Wendy at his side. He smiled, remembering how much she had enjoyed the game last night. Gently, the protagonist called her and woke her up. Still sleepy, she got up, giving him a good morning kiss. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the rabbit slipped free from Sort's grasp, who leaped out of the bush in a rage. She was ready to catch the small creature hopping around. Happy, she turned around to deal with another beast. A huge bear had appeared again, testing the blonde's patience. He dismissed it as annoying and immediately attacked. She easily took down the beast and shouted to her friends that the rabbit was coming. The creature ran, weapon in hand, as Renga announced its arrival. She wasn't there to waste time. The beast lunged, trying to hit her despite its small size. Despite that, she managed to dodge. Despite that, the rascal passed the warrior without difficulty. That was very fast. She refused to let it get away that easily. Someone threw a few stones toward it, leaving the rabbit unbalanced. Aina stood with her net ready, waiting for it to land as the new year began. They ambushed and caught the creature skillfully. This made Sorta celebrate her victory. All three gathered around it happily, and Sorta was already ready to eat rabbit soup. They pulled the animal from the net and found a stuffed toy instead. That made the little girl scream in anger, the rabbit. Indeed, it was in the middle of the forest, very happy with its victory. It laughed wildly, then encountered Shura, jumping right away to escape a girl but quick too. Now she craved rabbit stew, or he could catch it skillfully. At Itsuki's mansion, the young man helped with the laundry, and Wendy insisted he only do the easy tasks. A video caught them off guard. It was either a little girl the young man knew, or a ghoul accompanied by a classy guy. Not far from there, just before Itsuki received Darwin's house in a certain dungeon, Hayato was nearby, fighting a huge, ugly beast. Quickly, he split it in half, true to his heroic nature. He made sure his team was okay. The girl said everything was fine there. He was worried about Chris and wanted more specific information. Welcoming the girl, he asked everyone present to take a short break. They sat down for a snack, and Letty even handed food to her master. Going to that giant dungeon seemed excessive, but the Lord said there was nothing they could do because the elixir they sought lay in the dungeon's toughest sections, and one of the girls added that Origal's health was failing, so they had no choice. Letty said the poison used for the assassination was overkill, but Hayato said that kind of person was only an obstacle for evil people. They still had to carry out the mission. This girl is a woman. She even wondered if her master had news about it, Saki, but since they were in the dungeon, she couldn't use the guild cards to contact him, and she figured he would be fine. Fine, she was gathering ores for him because she'd promised to bring a souvenir. Sharing the same hometown and seeing the protagonist's kindness, Hayato quickly grew fond of him, and Letty even said he didn't seem like a bad person. Their conversation was interrupted when Recommando, one of the warriors, became hungry. To her, soup alone wasn't a meal. She was soon reprimanded by. The elf warned that if they were too noisy, they would attract monsters. Letty looks stressed. Hayato turns to Chris and asks if she thinks she'll be okay. Chris says Emily used healing magic to help, so she'll be fine. Then the group could move forward. Ultimately, they were there to save their feudal lord. The old man apologizes for arriving so suddenly and explains that his mistress expected to meet at souk that day. The girl's presence surprises him a lot. Then the man with a mustache formally introduces his lord, or a goal. They stand face to face, and the boy is visibly nervous. He apologizes for their last meeting because it wasn't very civilized, and she says he didn't need to be so polite. It was just a miscalculated landing. She still came out on top. Despite her childlike appearance, she was an adult. The girl takes the chance to introduce her butler to the boy, and the butler says it's a pleasure to meet him. Glancing around, she asks if the boy bought the mansion himself, and he says he received it from Darwin, adding that it was larger than he needed and even had an alchemy room and a very nice room. Bathroom, this last part piques the boy's interest, prompting him to ask if he could use it sometime. Naturally, the protagonist didn't deny it, and even said he had a really cool bathtub. Even using it once would impress her. Before he can finish, the girl starts coughing, and he worries it's Suki. Seeing the girl in front of him look quite pale, he asks Wendy to bring one of her potions. This piques Origal's curiosity, and he quickly explains that it is a restorative potion designed to heal everything. The Lord was surprised and asked if it was really okay to give her something that looked so expensive, but the protagonist wasn't worried and told her to go ahead. She takes it. When he asks how she feels, she says she's already feeling much better. She thanks him. Years with that settled, the boy had to learn why the girl was here today. Reminding her about her business, she had to discuss how to deal with Reng from the Red Front. That is a delicate matter for the protagonist, and the woman says she received the witness accounts from the people in the store where it all happened. Knowing about the agreement between him and Yasis, she still faced other concerns and recognized the helper's good intentions, but the city's order had to be maintained. Seeing the boy's actions and character, she decided to let him proceed as he saw fit just this once. This left him very grateful. None of his subordinates had seen the accident, and with no complaints or witnesses, they could act as if nothing had happened. However, the girl warns the protagonist is causing serious trouble in that city. Knowing it wasn't entirely his fault, she saw he was very willing to do it, and it was. This is quite bothersome. Even Maldonado steps in to ask him to try to stay. To keep her out of trouble, he wanted his boss to slow down to avoid straining her health. Origal tells him to stay out of it and immediately falls into another coughing fit. He was clearly worried and wanted to know if the girl was okay. Offering few details, she simply said she wasn't feeling well that day and had to say goodbye. She leaves the protagonist's residence. Itsaki felt concerned despite not knowing her well, leaving Wendy to wonder if the girl was really okay. A new problem waited for him when the warriors returned from their mission. Very proud, Sort carried the rabbit in her head. Her hands had some problems, of course, but they had achieved what they were meant to. Wanted, Sort was already bragging about how easy it was when the creature jumped out of the bag. Heading straight toward Wendy, Suki quickly moves to defend her. The frightened little creature clung to the girl's leg. Shiro pulls it back again and tells it to behave as if it were his. At the Lord's mansion, the girl was apologizing to the butler for the trouble she had caused earlier. Origal is allowed to rest in the room. An old man approaches him and asks if the girl is bedridden again, then explains she needs to sleep. It turned out the elixir they asked Hayato for was useless, and the old man was desperate about what they would do. The only way to cure this curse seemed to be spiritual medicine, so the goal became turning to God. Back at home, Itsuki couldn't shake the earlier incident. I gave Origal the cure for everything, but it did no good. Another thing that could help is a potion I kept. The next morning, Sukyu carefully prepared for his commitments. While shaving, he decided it would be better to make a razor in his next invention. Getting ready, he tells Wendy he'll be out for a bit. He might be late, so he'd eat dinner out. She asks where he is going, and he says he'll go to the lord of the city's mansion for a short time. Speaking of the mansion, a goat was taking his bath as you. The maid helping him wash his hair. She said she never knew when her time would come, so she always tried to look beautiful. Her comment embarrassed the maids. They say they love that city. As with the parents who live there, their whole lives are run by the girls. That's why they believed she should not give up hope until the end arrived. Or someone leaves a comment apologizing that they were right. He would like to spend much more time in that city. Soma enters the room and asks permission to announce its Ikizu rival, which was a. The other butler asks what he planned to discuss there, and the protagonist says it was a private matter. Next time, he must arrive at a scheduled time. Soma sees him to the hall door, and the young man thanks him. Ask for permission when entering. While Orgo apologizes for his appearance and asks what issue the other person wanted to discuss that day. The young man also apologizes for coming in without an appointment, but the blonde tells him to stop because his humble behavior embarrasses her. Then she would keep the girls with her. He says a single word, then reveals he came that day to brighten her day. The gift left the guys curious about the drink in his hand. He described it as a miraculous medicine. When they hear this, the men grow agitated and demand to know where he got the liquid. Unable to admit it, he wanted the girl to tell him whether her problem was more than physical. Illness. Before she could answer, the butler asks the maids, tells them to leave, then explains it was a curse. Cast by someone else, a butler who had been a colleague of both. He said the butler was set up by someone who planned to assassinate Oragle. The butler's master was Dataral, someone Itsuki knew very well. He's surprised that the man was involved, but the girl explains that when she died, the Lord's chair would be empty. Then Darwin could seize the chance to promote himself and become the Lord. That bastard was completely useless. Then Itsuki realized the girl had sent Hayato on the mission. She sadly explains that the young man failed to do what was asked of him. Uki apologizes for underestimating his friend like that. Insists that she take the potion, because if it could save her, it would be worth it. She accepts, deeply moved. Thank you very much for your kindness. The butlers also plead to be allowed to pay any price for it. The boy pauses to consider what payment would be fair. He had an idea. He planned to live in the city for a while, so making it comfortable would be a fair payment. A place to live was a great deal for Oragal. He left feeling very happy. A small commotion at the gate caught his attention. One of the guards explained they couldn't let anyone in without permission. The protagonist's maid complained that he was late. They went there because they heard he had gone to the Lord's house, so they left feeling worried. This key shows there was nothing wrong. Deep down, he is glad the girls care. With that settled, it was time for a drink on a drink. The group leaves happily, heading toward. At a bar, a few days had passed since Suki delivered the miraculous drug to Oragle. At last, he felt he would enjoy the peaceful life he had wanted from the start. He was sipping his tea as calmly as an old lady. When Yas asked where he had gotten those wheels, the handsome Rienrich was there and complained that the boy had not been to the alchemist recently. Darwin said enslaving Rengi was also a great feat. Those guys' heads smelled faintly of our boy's peace. They had gone to hear more about the miraculous drug, but that disturbed his peace. She even wondered if another assassination attempt was happening then and drawing so much attention to those figures. They had nothing left to say, and Darwin commented on how beautiful the house was. It's Suki, thank you for watching. Once again for the bathroom's comfort and the alchemy room being almost complete. The merchant bragged that he had managed to get one like that for himself. Mira arrived and said she could make millions in that alchemy room. He went there to turn in the boys' guild registration card and hoped to get the chance to work with him. He seemed unusually happy, and the boy said it was because he could now brag to Dharma. Naturally, Itsuki had no hesitation about exchanging contact information with the beautiful girl. Still, his older brother was at least disturbed. Darwin cut in and asked where the protagonist had gotten the miraculous drug and whether he had made it from scratch. At that question, everyone there fell silent because it was still a great mystery. He said the goddess gave it to him when he went to that world, and he didn't have the power to create something that incredible. Yasses let it slide because they were talking about a drifter, and that seemed acceptable, but Darwin couldn't let it pass. He asked to see the boy's guild card for evaluation. That left our boy nervous. He said he didn't go around showing his guild card to everyone. Even so, Darwin insisted. With nowhere to run, he handed it over quickly. Everything there surprised them, especially the spatial magic Darwin had believed was only a legend until then. Yasses looked too, noting how skilled the young man was for someone at such a high level. They asked about the boy's allowance ability, and he said he could now produce 5,100,000 coins at once each day. Bella Rainrich was the only one who remained silent until then. Then the crown showed how experienced and well-rounded her pupil was, and she doubted he had created the miraculous drug until she heard about it. Faced with so much information, Darwin wondered what the real story behind the medicine was. Now Itsuki was in a tight spot, unsure whether to tell the truth. At that moment, a third person entered the room and said she was curious about that too. Origold appeared, surprising everyone there, especially Darwin. Nikki wondered what had happened with the elixir recovery group the girl had summoned, but everything was fine because she had only gone to visit. Someone came close to greet Itsuki. Both of them stood in the same position. The pair looked very intimate to the guys nearby, and the girl said they were very affectionate with each other despite Suki disagreeing. Bella Rienrich said someone in their 40s shouldn't call it Suki in that tone. Origal said she was part elf and would keep that appearance until she passed on, and Myra still questioned why the girl preferred it. She was there and said she had made a promise to Itsuki, though he had no idea what it was about, and she asked him to respond with actions. To save himself, the protagonist asked Darwin for help. He said his time had come, and because the two needed to be alone, he used the chance to bring Yasas along. The girl then invited him to explore the other rooms in her house. She was eager to see the bathroom everyone talked about in that residence. Origal sounded excited and said she had fully recovered from the illness. That was good news, but it still left Suki nervous about her performance. When she arrived, she prepared too. She bathed carefully, protecting her hair. It was impressive how well she looked for someone in their form. Mira accompanied them as well, saying she was glad the lady had recovered that way. Then he noticed the girl there and wondered what she was doing. She'd been doing that, but she said she could join the two. She was the one who did it. Having designed the room, she felt free to enter it. All three enjoyed the pool. Although it was an awkward situation for our boy. Myra was clearly having the best bath of her life, and the woman was enjoying the warm pool too. That left the architect satisfied, and the protagonist asked whether she had known Darwin for a long time since he had implied it while they were having tea, and the girl said they were like childhood friends. She often chased Yasis and Darwin through the city when they played pranks on the candle, which was hard to imagine. To change the subject, the girl was curious who his favorite possession in that house was. He felt a little awkward, but Origal insisted it was important to know and was even willing to become one of them. If Itsaki showed interest, Mary entered the conversation because she could not ignore it. Comment revealing her father's wish for the protagonist as a son-in-law, making things It gets a bit more complicated and leaves the boy between two girls. Ultimately, the women stayed there. They talked all night without getting any sleep. That's why he wandered the halls, feeling sleepy, while Wendy watched him without speaking. She stood alone in the kitchen. It was her mouth, she convinced herself. They were close friends, so sharing a room at night was no problem. Consumed by jealousy, she couldn't really complain. Then Itsuki entered the kitchen, surprising her. The girl nervously did what he asked, while the boy, also there, asked for tea to stay awake and noticed the maid seemed unwell. She tried to hide it and felt unbearably embarrassed. Getting nervous over something so simple, while she drank her tea, Sort and Shiro asked if Wendy seemed strange. Please subscribe to our channel. The previous day left Itsuki confused and trying to explain that Mira and Origal had stayed in her room to show they did not have that kind of thing, and that the boy had no idea about them. The real situation slightly surprised the little girl. Renge suddenly appeared and asked why he had not apologized after all. That would only make things worse with Wendy, and the boy got flustered at the idea of apologizing to the girl because he didn't want to get into trouble. Rushing out to find the maid, he fell to the ground. In the garden, Aina searched for her master with Wendy, who explained that he must be there. In the alchemy room, she soon noticed something was wrong with the maid and asked if everything was over. She denied it, saying it was nothing serious. Aina considered insisting but knew it would not help, so she went over to her friend and suggested they enjoy the hot pool together. They took a moment just for the two of them. Wendy had no idea why she suggested that, but Aina seemed excited. She said her friend was truly beautiful. Her fighting skills made her very different from the unsuitable woman she thought she was. Wendy said she was all ears if Aina had something to say. For Aina, the only thing that mattered was that her friend was okay. She nearly spoke up when she saw how fragile Wendy was, but thought better of it. She decided it was better not to. By her own account, she wasn't always very delicate about that kind of thing. Wendy began to open up, saying it wasn't anything grand, just that she could be selfish sometimes. That was enough for Aina to understand what her friend meant. She was talking about Itsuki and really liked him. Even so, Anna still found him mysterious. She knew he was dependable and fun, unlike the others. Her words made the maid think the warrior might be. Someone was interested in her master, so the girl explained she liked him but felt differently. She acted like she had to protect him, as if he were sinful and too close to women, and that made Wendy laugh. Still, she didn't want her friend to be sad. After they exchanged affection, the girl asked Danae if she wanted anything specific to eat that night because she planned to return. The favor, dinner, had been carefully prepared, and even Itsuki noticed it, though he didn't know why, and everyone at the table could see it, including Ranga and Sort. That turned out to be a good thing, and Wendy was in a much better mood after being very sad earlier. Once it was okay to lie down, he lay on his bed and looked like an exile. Just as he was about to rest, someone knocked at the door, and it was Aina who wanted to talk briefly. The boy asked what she wanted at that moment, but then decided to open the door. It was surprising to find the warrior accompanied by Wendy. He was affected quite a bit, but the girl explained it. He couldn't stand by and let the maid die like that, even though Wendy didn't seem to care, but Aina said. Keeping those feelings inside without talking wasn't healthy and had to be resolved. She was there to see the two reconcile. She said, my God, they could pretend she wasn't there and that they were helping her. Each other, she returned quickly to the room she shared with Sword, completely flushed and leaving her friend worried about what had happened. The next morning, one of the maids called for everyone to wake and gather with Itsuki's maids. Why did the boy ask what was happening so early? Then someone sort of tried to explain that something was out of order, which was not very enlightening, but the girl added that the public morality in that house was out of order. Still, Itsuki keeps questioning what she says because it doesn't make sense to him to talk about these things. The girl suddenly explains that Aina acted strangely after returning to the room yesterday, and when she heard the explanation, she wondered what the boy had shown her as he approached. She tells him to be quiet, saying public moral disorder is rooted in the heart and that emotional relationships are now forbidden there. But Itsaki retorts he won't forgive her for such tyranny and that no dog can decide what is allowed. Sort was left stressed because she was a wolf, not a dog. Grabbing Wendy, the master says she is very annoying and can't just take away the love. He felt that way. It was his house, so if she didn't like it she could leave, and that made her act like a rabid dog. To calm her master's nerves, the governess makes tea. He wondered what was wrong with that girl, and the woman understood his concern and meant to apologize for what happened last night, but the protagonist stopped her because it was not her fault. Having perhaps pushed things too far by telling Sort to leave the house, he goes to his room and announces his arrival, asking her to open the door willingly. But the girl appears like a devil and says no one was there. She asks what he wanted, and Itsuki says he went too far earlier. Surprisingly, he apologized to the girl sincerely and seemed to regret his decision. Then he took the chance to ask where Aina was in all this. Renj said earlier she panicked because she did not want an open relationship with the master and ran away. Sort takes the chance to make a scene about her friend being ignored by that piece of trash of a man. Someone asked why she was being so harsh with her. In any case, the girl tells him to apologize to her friend as soon as the friend returns. At home, Renj stepped in and told them both to stop fighting. It was great the master was there because she had something very important to ask. The bed was very soft, and since her body was used to hard surfaces, her muscles were getting stiffer, so she asked if he knew of any medication for it. Suzuki says it wasn't, that there was no solution, and if the problem was pain, he could give the girl a massage, which she accepts awkwardly because it's a hassle. That was no problem for the protagonist, who asked her not to worry because he would release her tension points. In his old world, he was a pro-level masseur. He gets ready to act, soothing the girl to help her relax until something makes her feel awkward. She left the massage clearly flustered, and he had. To show Sort he had done nothing indecent. The feeling felt great, so he took the chance. A chance to give the dog the same treatment. Picking her up makes her nervous, but he promises he will only make her feel good despite her reluctance. The man begins checking the girl for any tight spots. He keeps going until he feels strong tension in one of her legs. His squeeze makes her scream. She loses control, even though it felt very pleasant. A single touch made her whole body burn. She repeatedly insisted she couldn't do that kind of thing. Seeing that reminded me that it's the key to a very specific failing. Back on Earth, buried in work, he grew too tired to do anything, and only watching cute puppy videos cheered him up. Getting a puppy was something he always wanted, but he never had the time to get one. A fluffy puppy tail was now right in front of him. He couldn't resist sniffing that spot, and it took Sort completely by surprise. She was very sensitive, so even when she felt fine, she asked him to stop soon. Itsaki had become a little addicted to that puppy smell. The girl still insists he forgive her because she was harsh with him. Earlier she felt uncomfortable with all that affection. After she left, even the maids noticed Sort was acting unusually, and Itsuki admits he may have overdone the massage. At the Alchemy Guild, Itsuki had tea with Bella Rienrich and wondered why they were so formal with each other. To avoid the loneliness of ending up without friends, she kept up her old friendships. She says the young man would understand this better as he grew older, while Shiro was with Rita in the kitchen. He even joked with his friend that Rita was quite scary, so he decided to leave her alone, and before leaving, Rita handed the child a small gift that delighted them. After saying their goodbyes, they head into the city, and since it's almost lunchtime, Itsuki suggests they grab something to eat. Shiro quickly said she wanted to eat meat. It was impressive how much the girl. As they spoke, a young man came up to them. The protagonist might have missed it, but the attentive child never did. To protect her master from a would-be thief, she pushed him. Itsaki was shocked when he fell to the ground, but even so the young man managed to grab his magic bag. That stressed our boy, so he tossed a ball toward the protagonist and Shiro and said it was payment for the item he took. He distracted the two with a kind of magical smoke that was supposed to be harmless. Shiro wouldn't let that slide and told her master to wait there because she would recover her back. By then the boy was already far away with the alchemist's belongings, confident he had gotten a good sum of money from him. He felt a surge of excitement because he hadn't eaten anything but moldy bread in a long time. Shiro moved close enough to stop him and told him to return the item that was very important to her master. The little boy looked surprised that she had found him so quickly. He drew his blade and told her to move if she wanted to avoid getting hurt. Shiro was not at all intimidated. She reversed the situation and took the upper hand. He went back to the young man and told him to return the item quickly. He fell to the ground, screaming like a real child and insisting she return it. He had stolen only to get food and was crying like a baby. Shiro felt a little sorry for the boy. She decided to present a better proposal. She held out the gift Rita had given her so he would stay and eat, saying it was a tasty candy. The girl knew things could get tougher when you were hungry, so she said her goodbyes. When he opened the package, he found they were candies, which did not seem as good as they were. How much money he could get from Suki's magic bag. At the same time, the little girl was trying to find her math. Recognized on the street as one of the main character's maids, she was asked by a woman what she was doing in a place like this. After all, she was close to Yas's shop. When she walked in, a waitress asked if she was the girl who'd ruined the store some time ago. Someone asked what she was doing there. Her friend said the child had gotten lost, so she brought her back and checked the little one was okay. She felt embarrassed. Shiro apologized for the incident the other day, and it seemed to put the waitress at ease. Inside, the girl who had brought her told an older woman that she had caused some trouble before the store opened. She apologized, but the old woman was very pleased that she had repaired the store. Mira said the credit really belonged to Yasis, who had great connections, and the architect added that she was waiting there for Itsuki, so she would have to stay a bit longer, which was not a problem. Meanwhile, the shop girls were having fun with Shiro's new clothes, treating her like a doll. At that moment, Itzyki arrived, a bit awkward, asking why they were not leaving the girl alone. He thanked Myra for looking after his friend. He thanked Shiro for finding his bag, then said it was time to go, and the little girl smiled at being recognized. Days later, heavy rain fell over the city. Two people had arrived at the protagonist's mansion. The housekeeper suddenly announced it. To his surprise, the visitor was Hayato. He asks for the wet clothes of the pair who had arrived so she could take care of them. Once he relaxes, Hayato notices how large the mansion is. Wendy formally identifies herself as his mother. That worked well for the adventurer. It's been a long time since they last saw each other, and the hero apologizes for arriving so suddenly. Still, Itsuki welcomed his friends and wanted to know why they had come. Hayato says he heard a lot about Itsuki's activities in the city after Itsuki became somewhat famous. Our boy says it was nothing special and asks what problem brought him to his house, but he was actually there to apologize and thank the protagonist. He was referring to the assassination attempt on Mira. He was referring to the assassination attempt on Oracle. At first, his team was meant to get the elixir from the dungeon and bring it to her, and he knew it was valuable, but they failed the mission and caused trouble for its ukulele. Who was slightly surprised to learn that his friend was supposed to get the raw material. For him it was fine. He had no use for the miraculous drug he gave Oracle. Hayato even tries to argue. Itsuki shrugs it off, saying he had a special connection with the girl and was glad to help. The dungeon's difficulty made him curious because his friend was a great warrior, and he could not imagine any place that friend could not conquer. The hero then says things were very difficult there. Memories flashed of the time he was still inside, telling his team that the number of monsters kept increasing, and he told his girls to be careful from then on so they would not get lost, and Emily needed to make sure Chris was okay. She asks them to take a break so she can recover, but her friend interrupts and says everything is fine. Still, Hayato thinks they should take a break, so the girl apologizes. Meanwhile, they checked their equipment and the potions they had left. Unable to use her sword or spells, she felt she was holding the team back and was useless. She remembered her former companion, saying she couldn't even be used as bait. She grew more anxious, and Emily asking if she would go with them pulled her out of her thoughts. They left soon after, as the girl confirms. Leaning against a rock to get up, she discovered something unexpected. She was left stunned. It was a trap. A spear was coming straight at her, too close for anyone to stop it. That was why she abandoned the mission. Facing Itsuki, Hayato admits he felt guilty, because if he had paid more attention, this would not have happened. Emily finally speaks up, saying she was very close to Chris at the time, so it wasn't her master's for. When Itsuki asks about the girl's injury, the hero says she lost her right eye. A potion could heal most wounds, but it couldn't fix a delicate organ like an eye. They needed something that matched the elixir. He would definitely act because Chris was a very important friend he had hurt. He learned the elixir would be sold at the underground auction in the royal capital, and he planned to participate. He would spend every last cent if it meant healing his friend. Itsuki thinks that with the right materials, he could brew a potion for the boy, and he wanted to save him on his own. After the rain stopped, the friends were ready to leave. Hayato apologizes again and says goodbye. The protagonist reminds the other man that, in his eyes, the other man will always be an eternal apprentice in that world, and invites him to mention anything that could help. Hayato is deeply grateful, so the hero invites him to come to the auction in the royal capital. The idea felt strange, since the protagonist had never left the city. He would go without any problems. The horse-drawn carriage trip would take about 2 days, and they would leave in 3 days. Suki says Wendy will probably go with him. Before they left, he asked her boss to wait, or to fill out a questionnaire about what happened. She asks him to forget it. The hero is. He had insisted out of curiosity, but by today, he had already given up. Watching the two of them was pretty funny and harmless. He even makes a pun suggesting the girl doesn't want any trouble while traveling with Hayek. He was eager to know who the hero's favorite was, but he is. The girl reprimands him and tells him to be more sensitive when talking about delicate subjects like that, which forces Sukiya to apologize. Meanwhile, at the group's lodging, one of the girls knocks on the room door, insisting Chris needed to eat because she had been fasting all day. Inside, the girl looked more dead than alive. Emily was reading her book when her friend arrived and called to get her attention. Desperate, she knew Chris still hadn't eaten that day and needed to be fed. The elf was worried, but she sensed there was more going on with the sick girl. Just then, Hayato and Letty witnessed the two of them in that emotional scene. Emily says they were like that because of Chris. Yes, it was something Letty understood. The auto didn't even ask what happened and decided he had to see the girl. He walked slowly up to the girl's room. He knocked on the door. From inside, he could hear Chris apologizing over and over. Nothing was explained clearly, and she just kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. That was why he didn't go in, so he went back down and found Letty at the bottom of the stairs, and she asked how the friend was doing. Around the table, everyone agreed Chris needed to return. Sadness settled over Hayato. Emily watched him with concern until Letty suggested they ask a specific person for help. It was a key, and the girl remembered the protagonist had said his master could be called if someone was there. Emily agreed they needed to trust someone because the hero was overwhelmed. It was a good idea, so he used his guild card. They explained the situation to the boy, and he asked the team to come to his house for now. He apologized for bothering the protagonist, but it did not mind Suki. He was happy to help his friend with something. The two said their goodbyes, and our boy asked Wendy for help. Someone who would gladly do anything for her master. Itsuki himself greeted them when they arrived. He thanked them for being in that mansion. Wendy guided the girls, and that is a key observation. Chris still looked weak, and the maid noticed Emily wondering if she was really. They were living there, and it had been a long time since they had seen each other. The fact they even knew each other was surprising enough. The elf said she would not forgive him if he made her friend cry. Being scolded by Wendy, who told the boy not to worry about her. During dinner, Itsuki said it was just a group of friends traveling together to the capital to have a good time. The food was really delicious and even let it. Acknowledge that and try not to overindulge. It was a key moment when he invited them to enjoy the well-designed bathroom in his. He countered that the inn they were staying at also had a bathroom, but the boy boasted there was no comparison. That bath was a replica of the one from his hometown, designed by Mira. This made the girls a little more excited, the protect. Even Dragonist invited Hayato into the hot pool, but he turned it down. Wendy took the chance to ask Chris to follow her for a moment. Itsuki stressed that his maid was reliable and likely had a plan. In the end, she took the girl to the kitchen and apologized for asking her to help wash the dishes, but the maid didn't mind and was happy to help with anything. She asked if the meal had pleased the guest's palate, and the girl replied that everything was very delicious. Wendy then opened the door to ask if she would also like to try cooking, which the girl was surprised, but Wendy explained she had spoken with her master and her friends, who also said her food was quite tasty. Cress was seriously considering leaving the grid. Wendy asked why, and the girl explained she felt she was holding everyone back because she had been hurt during a mission. It would be better for him if she weren't around. There, Wendy wondered if those feelings were real, and if she truly did not want to be with Hayato and all the girls. It wasn't quite right, she wanted to but was too weak. Letty entered the kitchen with a hostile look, complaining that if she had not been with them in battle, they would have starved. Emily and Hayato entered the room too, saying they'd have a lot of trouble without her in the group. Having helped them many times, she should accept from now on. They helped too, and the team wrapped the girl in a big hug. Watching the scene, Itsuki thanked Wendy for her sensitivity, which was clearly not a problem for the girl. In the sauna, the girls nearly melt from the heat of the hot pool. Letty warns her friends not to stay inside too long, or they'll get very dizzy from the heat. They agree anyway, knowing they won't act on the advice. Chris seizes the chance to tell her friend that she could manage on her own. The older girl wanted her to depend more on the team because she was injured and asked whether the hot water was making her dizzy, but the girl says she feels fine. Calling to Letty, she thanks her for everything she's done. In return, the girl says the next day she would like to eat a soup made by her, and her friend agrees to it without hesitation. That heated pool lasted only one day. Outside, the protagonist was making something very interesting. They were wedding rings that, when Hayato wore them, boosted his offense and defense and increased his resistance to abnormal states. The name made clear the rings came as a pair and boosted a wearer's abilities according to the couple's level of intimacy. Intrigued, the hero wanted to know why it came as a pair. Itsuki said he made them with a wedding ring in mind, but he was only joking. His friend's creations impressed him, for now he is having a lot of fun. He made enough rings for all the hero's girls, so he wanted him to accept them as a gift. He felt bad about causing so much trouble, but Itsuki asked again for the boy not to. He made them from materials he got from Heiichiro. Thinking he could sell them at the auction, he decided to accept them as a gift. As they walked down the hallway, luck found its lord. The boy questioned the. She wondered what the problem was because his face was so red and asked what he meant. "You're going to the imperial capital, and we didn't know anything about it," the girl added. Right behind them, Aina and Ranga appeared, asking Luck to calm down. They said they heard it from Wendy and wanted to check whether the boy was really going to the capital. Excited, he asked whether the warriors were going too. That was why Luck was so stressed. They couldn't get ready that quickly. She knocked the boy to the ground, and while the blonde complained he was selfish, Ine and Hayato checked that Hitsuki was okay. Then he noticed another guy and wondered who he was. Hayato apologized for introducing himself late, called himself a hero, and said he had already heard rumors about the Red Front. At the sound of the name, they were stunned to find themselves face to face with the greatest dragon slayer in existence. The adventurer who killed the dragon and rose to the highest level. Lux's expression changed suddenly, and the girl said it was a pleasure too. They met him, and he was pleased to meet the girls from the Red Front. Aina introduced herself as Your Excellency, but he said such formality was unnecessary. Meeting the famous hero was an honor, and he said the honor was his because he had always heard stories about the Red Front. Turning back to Itsuki, the girl said there was no way to properly apologize for telling him about the trip so late. Just back from a grueling materials run, this was easy. It was sudden. It would be nice if the boy said a few words of thanks as usual, which made Itsuki apologize and explain they could stay at the house if they did not want to go with him. That was never going to happen. Luck refused to stay home while her master enjoyed himself in the capital. Friends urged her to hurry. They hadn't set it up in a long time. They arrived on foot and didn't have time to make any preparations. Cookie made sure they were ready and had already finished all the travel arrangements. That surprised the warrior a little. He even collected underwear for everyone. That ruined the mood of gratitude because the man was being inconsiderate. She didn't know how he had her clothing sizes, and it felt scary. Hayato stepped into the conversation, apologized for the inconvenience, and explained to Leia that he had invited his friend to come with him. Luck, the little girl, said not to worry since they were already used to fending for themselves because of Itsuki. The hero also knew why the girls were with the protagonist. As an important friend of the protagonist, he wanted the warriors to take good care of. The boy led the group until Shiro appeared. He vowed to protect the master at all costs, a surprising stroke of luck. The child always made sure everyone knew how strong she was. They were very good girls to have. By then, he already thought of them as great friends. Hayato's group shows up in the hallway and calls for their master. Letty specifically needed a hand to carry the elf. He asks what happened, and she says they got dizzy from staying too long in the hot pool. Mary's bathroom was impressive. Uki offers to call Wendy, while his friend apologizes and the other girls try to compose themselves. A lot had happened since Itsuki arrived in that world. Now he was ready to go to the imperial capital. Perfect weather for a walk, and Itsuki was reviewing some rules to make the trip more enjoyable. The girls should consult the travel manual he once had. They were handed the items and used them to make a safe path. For some reason, Soty felt quite tired. Only Aina explains that in the master's world, it would be necessary to travel in peace. Apparently, the solo trip organizer was named Kansi, and Wendy says Itsuki was very excited when he began planning. Before they left, Sodi told him she'd heard he had prepared everything and asked if it was okay to use the new clip. The girls even apologize for going so far just to get them, but Suki asks them not to. They did not need to worry because he was their master and made sure they always felt good. As a result, Soty had been even friendlier toward him. Things were fine until he mentioned that he'd checked the size of her mannequins, which she found rude. He cuts into the argument to ask if they were going to leave soon. I couldn't help but notice the beautiful dress she was wearing. It was the first gift he bought her, and she says she rarely wore it because wearing it felt like a waste. This was her first trip with the boy, and her comment left him embarrassed. Shiro. Jumping onto the man's back, she tells him to hurry, and they set off. Remove it, it's the key that controls the horses. As his girls chatted inside the carriage, they soon found Heya, who was traveling in his own vehicle. They paused so Itsuki could stretch. Itsuki felt his hips needed work after not practicing. He asks how long it would take to get to the capital. If all went well, it was just a couple more days. Then he noticed something different in that vegetation. A type of giant caterpillar. That put the girls on edge, making them think it could be a monster. All the more because Itsuki was clinging to Hayato. Ine soon realizes it's just a tiny caterpillar and luckily carries it, reassuring them that everything was fine and it wasn't scary. Even so, it clearly calls on the girl to do something about it. Monster, Hayato's girls feared something serious had happened and wondered what was wrong with Suki. He clearly couldn't stand insects, and that was a problem. Hayato was already annoyed by how long the hug lasted. They settled matters between them and decided to resume the journey when it was. As night approached, they chose a spot to camp. The girls stretched happily to get out of the vehicle. They went to get water from a nearby lake, and you were probably enjoying camping. Normally our boy did this, but he was hooked on camping and they even came across a unicorn. That surprised the boy, apparently that. Such things were normal there, as you'd expect in another world. That creature looked nothing like the unicorn he had imagined. It was covered in horse horn parasites. He warned Hayato and the others that humans could also pick up parasites there, so they should be careful. Even a moth with a horse's body that looked like a Pegasus was quite scary. Terrifying and standing on two legs, the creature made it clear the guys needed to get out, and seeing those creatures made the protagonist even more nostalgic for Japan. At nightfall, a few of the girls caught some creatures and brought back a bit of me. After making soup with the animals, Chris made sure to praise Wendy for the recipe. They were much more relaxed, sharing their food. He's just chilling. I had no idea he even played the banjo. Seizing the chance, he stayed in the trees until he fell asleep. Suki was supposed to sleep, but she stayed awake and looked around a bit. Wendy approaches him and asks if he's not going to sleep, and the boy says it's a bit later. He thought sleeping was a waste of time, so the girl decided to join the master. They both kept gazing at the stars, ch 14. 42. At dawn, the girls went to wash in the nearby lake, which had very cold water. After they got used to the heated pool, bathing anywhere else was much harder. Hayato's girls appeared completely at ease, laughing it off as if it meant nothing. Still, he couldn't help noticing how beautiful they were. But the athletes seemed bothered. Getting called out by the girl. Meanwhile, it's Suki and Hayato here, and were preparing something to eat. Wendy had already arrived and was saying, until he invited him to breakfast. This surprised the girls. The food was very tasty, and it was surprising that a man knew how to cook in that world. He kept showering his Suki with compliments. Renj happened to be smashing the food. Wendy apologizes for the trouble the master went through, but to him it was all quite. It was fun, and the other girls thanked him for the different breakfast. To their surprise, the keyhead even made dessert for them. Using a spoon, he served everyone there. Hayato was surprised that he had managed to make something like that in the middle of the woods. He had made ice cream. That was truly impressive. The hero made sure he could eat that precious food. On the first bite, he felt incredible. That key made him feel a little proud that he could do so much with magic in that world. The hero was relieved to eat a treat that actually had flavor instead of tasting like pure sugar. There wasn't any vanilla, so the flavors were a bit limited. Still, it was impressive that he made ice cream. The girls were very happy when they tasted it. Emily had never heard of using an herb like vanilla in food, but she found it amazing. Tasting the ice cream, she almost melted. The protagonist promised to teach Chris how to make it so she could prepare it for her master. A roaring, fearsome creature appeared, and Anna told her friend to protect the carriage. Both spring into action without difficulty, fighting a horde of dragons alone. I had no trouble finishing off the creatures, much less lucky than someone who was already used to the. She jumped to deliver her best strike, moving toward the dragons as they rip their necks, landing on the ground with control. She kept her balance despite one of the creatures trying to strike her from behind. It failed when Anna stew. I stopped it by kicking the beast in the face, and surprisingly it's okay. It was the first time he had seen the Red Front fight alongside. Even though they knew it was normal to fight monsters while traveling in that world, he had been caught off guard. At that moment he saw a dragon behind him, poised to strike. When he used one of his powers, invisible chains tightened and blew the creature's head apart. Still, the result was quite grotesque. Luck asked if he was okay, and he said yes while Shiro just watched his master. His gaze stayed on the slain creature. Though it was an enemy monster, he had killed it, and that was it. He moved closer to see if he was hurt, but he was fine. He looked quite pale. Apologizing, he asked to step outside for a bit. Next time he would leave the fighting to the girls. At the same time, Hayato congratulated the Red Front on her skills. Thus, they set off again, leaving the campsite. We finally arrive at the royal capital. When they finally arrived, the group was thrilled. We live in a big city, but the atmosphere felt completely different. It felt different. People walking through the city had a distinct charm, and many of the women were elegant. Itsuki couldn't get too excited because high-level girls like Wendy and Ine were nearby. The citizens there welcomed Hayato warmly. He apologizes especially to the girls. Apologizing to one of the guards for the confusion, he asked that the mansion be announced as back. One official introduced the new guard, who asked the boy to sign the sword he had used. That was not a problem. Itsuki told the maid the boy was quite popular there, but she didn't mind. One of the girls in the group even said he was under strong political pressure to marry. Being handsome, he could call his friends and ask them to join him. When they arrived, the group was amazed. He wasn't exaggerating when he called it a mansion. Luck said it was easily 4 times the size of the house they lived in, including its soup. There was a considerable difference between them, even though both were drifters. The boy. Roy says it was caused by a physical difference between Renj and Sort. even though both were wolves. The girl is stressed and finds it hard to tell them to stop. Despite the size of the house, Hayato asks them to feel it. An endless line of maids welcomed the group, and it was almost an army. Sired, the mansion's butler, also introduces himself. Himself a huge man, he could easily have been a fighter. Hayato explains that the man was half giant and half human. He knew a hybrid like him could make the protagonist uncomfortable, so he apologized to the protagonist. Quickly, the protagonist says it was pretty cool to have a giant, muscular butler. Fried commented that his master had said the same thing when they first met, and it felt almost like déjà vu. The man promises to dedicate himself to providing the group with the best hospitality during their stay there. He offers to lead them to their temporary room. That was surprising. It wasn't luxurious, but the rooms and furniture were tasteful. He could tell that several things there were better than at home. They told him 3 rooms were ready for him to use, and he could ask the maid outside if he had any questions. Using luck, they chose rooms and ended up with Ine and Itsuki, Renge and Wendy, and Shiro and Sort. Despite debating the outcome, the girls stayed civil. With the auction still 2 days away, he could relax while Hayato went to the castle to talk to the kids. King led the way, and Letty and the others followed, but Chris chose to stay at the mansion to learn how to make ice cream. During tea, Fried said he had heard the protagonist was a disciple of Bella Rouse. Reinrich was held in high regard there, and as her apprentice he would be too. Already expecting the old woman to be truly amazing, he seized the moment to ask if there was anything interesting to do while they waited for the auction. The butler suggests the cathedral because it had a good view. They called the girls, all agreed to go on the outing, and they went to that place. It felt unfamiliar. He remembered back in Japan when he had to. He liked traveling for work. At last they arrived, free to announce them, and the view was stunning. The cathedral was enormous. Although Itsuki had seen foreign churches online before, the real one was much longer. As the butler prepared the carriage, the group was free too. They explored, and one of the nuns welcomed them. If they were going to donate, it would start at 1,000 per person. Then there were 6, she thanks you. Thank them and ask God there to bless them all. Before leaving to guide them, they even built the interior of the cathedral. It's bigger, and when they reach the chapel, Suki is surprised. He stood facing the famous stained glass window of the royal capital cathedral. That showed the goddess of the new world. Moved by the figure's beauty, the young man began to cry, drawing some attention, who quickly asked why he was crying like a little girl. He didn't even notice he was crying until she spoke. The good one asked if he was okay, and by the time he noticed, his team was already gathered around him in the distance. 2 nuns commented on it, laughing at the man. Changing the subject a bit, he asks if one of the maids can buy souvenirs for Hayato and the other girls. The image of the goddess was impressive. Shiro sits beside him, asking if the master was really. It might have been touched. One of the nuns remarked that the impression he felt revealed the depth of his faith. The talk felt very strange, even so. The woman continued, saying that to deepen that feeling, all he had to do was pray. The woman felt Itsuki had a sacred strength full of divine energy. He wasn't sure if it was good or bad. Afterward, she says it was great. Having ample divine energy meant he could receive the goddess's baptism, and in that meant he would learn healing magic and all the other sacred magics, and it excited him. He wanted to use that kind of enchantment, but she says he did not have enough divine energy. That completely killed his buzz. The woman argued he could greatly increase his divine energy by praying every day. At first, it looked like a simple task. Though she said it was extremely difficult, when he disagrees, she insists it was, which makes the phrase, "it's a key," awkward to contradict. Because it would be hard for him, she could teach him an easier way to get the goddess's blessings, leaving the young man a little more curious. She says this method was a donation. Make sure the boy understands everything and tell Shiro to hurry so they can go home soon. The nun grows desperate, saying the energy is slipping away, but he doesn't care, and when she tries to get his attention, it is not the same. It's okay to ask how much money he needs to donate. The woman says it was 100 coins, but in fact it was 10 gold coins, and that would not be much effort for the young man. Suki throws the money toward the woman and says it would be for the goddess. The nun thanks him and offers "May the goddess bless the boy, he will be the one." They were already a little tired of that kind of seller, and were surprised people like that existed in the world too. Noticing Shiro is distracted, he asks what is wrong. She then says she smelled food coming from one direction. The room was huge, and the protagonist thought it looked like a cafeteria. All the nuns were inside, drinking and lighting one at the same time. Someone laughed that they had managed to buy those things using only money from the faithful. Suzuki peeked through the crack, disappointed by everything that was happening. He closes the door looking sad, but he opened it again to make sure he had seen it correctly, watching one of them boast about opening another new bottle. They were very degenerate women who commented on each other's clothes and makeup, planning to use the faithful's money for frivolous expenses, always encouraging the things. Group the key is steps away from the door again. He knew it wasn't a church, but a secret base for that kind of dirty business. So he calls Shiro to get them out of there, but the girl is no longer at his side and is eating a chicken leg. She spoke to the nuns who did not know where that cute child had come from. At that moment, they spot someone peeking through the door and decided to open it wide, which startled it and made it spooky, and knocked him to the ground. One of them recognizes him from earlier and insists he could not be involved in something like that. The protagonist claims he got lost and didn't see anything inside. It didn't matter if anyone had seen them, had to obey and would go home in peace. The nun makes it clear that he must be very obedient. Uki Suolo was having a hard time, wondering what was happening with those people. The women quickly tied him to a chair inside. They blew into the boy's face in the rudest possible way. Shiro enjoyed the food, but he wondered what he needed to do. One girl says he couldn't leave the room. She pointed her weapon at him and asked exactly what the protagonist had seen. She insisted the silence stressed her, but the boy hesitated to answer. That could only be a joke. Seeing that he wasn't going to spill the beans, she comments that there was a same. They said silence was golden, so it was all it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the boy had seen it wrong. The insinuation made the protagonist even angrier. He was convinced it was wrong to see church sisters drinking and smoking. His words offended them, and a nun asked if he hadn't heard the captain. That was exactly the misunderstanding he had noticed. The wine was regarded as God's blood and was permitted in the church. The cigars were made by rolling sacred leaves. It was all meant to ease divine tension. The truth is, church sisters were supported by offerings given to them when they purified people. They used the faithful's money to feed themselves. Banning cigars and drinks would reduce their divine energy. That last part didn't make much sense to Uki, but the nuns were already impatient and said they didn't know who had taught him the basics of the church. If it harmed an innocent person, the divine energy would drop. If someone died for their faith, they would receive the goddess's blessing, that proved the nun's work wasn't a fraud, and the boy went back to what he'd heard, wondering if praying every day could really let him use healing magic. One woman explains that if he truly believed in it, it would boost that energy and raise his level of magic. That's why the captain was there, a saintly figure. The woman standing in front of him left him deeply embarrassed, and he could hardly believe it. People believed she was a saint. Saints were kind and noble and smelled like flowers. She smelled of alcohol and cigarettes and carried a huge cross as if it were a weapon. While he drifted in thought, the nuns argued among themselves about whether the captain was a saint. Unbothered, she said she was an exception and could hardly believe she had been chosen. It was truly splendid and had many physical qualities. Being called captain confused Itsuki because in theory they were all sisters. One of the girls explains she was the captain of the chivalric order of priestesses and killed the undead to save the innocent, which is why they called her that. Itsuki realizes the little girl was the order's leader, and the woman knows it is hard to believe an ordinary child could become a leader, but she says the goddess's blessing lets her swing that huge steel cross with one hand. That left her body firm and without feminine qualities. She says the goddess was cruel to give that fate to the blonde. The boy wonders if she hated having all that power. The nun had already noticed, and she was relieved she did not seem like a muscle-bound monster after all. Itsuki still thought it was cool, and her words seemed to surprise the sisters. He argues that even if she did not want that power, she would not help just anyone, and he thought the goddess played that role well. Captain Teresa was clearly a force to be reckoned with. Her words were moving, strengthened by the other girls who crowd around the woman. She casually said she would take them all. Shiro continued to enjoy her small piece of bread, saying it was delicious. That concludes the video. To avoid missing the next part, turn on the notification bell.